Hi guys, tonight we step into a world so distant that even memory seems to hesitate, a place where the earth feels wider, quieter and untouched by anything familiar. You find yourself standing beneath a vast open sky, the air cool and clean, carrying only the faint scent of damp soil and distant vegetation. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, scattered with stones that have rested here for longer than anyone could measure. Somewhere nearby, a faint crackling sound hints at a small fire. Its glow soft and steady against the deepening darkness. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, let me know where you are in the world and what time it is for you right now. There is something quietly comforting in knowing how many different places connect through moments like this. Now dim the lights and let yourself settle into the slow rhythm of a time that feels almost unreachable. You begin to walk. There is no path, not in the way you would expect. No roads, no clear direction. Just open land stretching outward in every direction, shaped only by wind, water, and time. The ground feels firm beneath your feet, though here and there it softens into patches of dust or damp earth. Each step leaves a faint impression, but even those marks feel temporary, as if they will vanish with the next breeze. This is a world long before cities, before written history, before anything that could record a moment like this. And yet people are here, in the distant past during what we now call the late stage of the Ice Age. Small groups of early humans moved across landscapes like this, living entirely from what they could gather, hunt, or discover. They did not stay in one place for long. Instead, they followed the rhythms of the land, moving with the seasons, adjusting to the slow shifts in climate and animal movement. You notice something ahead. At first, it is just a subtle change in the ground, a cluster of stones arranged in a way that feels slightly different from the natural scatter around you. As you approach, you begin to see more signs, a faint outline of where a fire once burned. A few broken fragments of stone that look as though they have been shaped, not randomly fractured. You crouch down, running your fingers gently across one of the pieces. It is smooth along one edge, sharp along another. A tool. Simple, yes, but intentional. Early humans during this period relied heavily on stone tools carefully shaped through a process known as flint knapping. By striking one stone against another, they could create sharp edges used for cutting, scraping, and preparing food. It was not a fast process. It required patience, observation, and a growing understanding of how materials behaved under pressure. And yet even with these tools, life remained uncertain. You sit back on your heels, looking out across the open land. The silence is not empty. It is filled with subtle sounds. A distant rustle of movement, the whisper of wind passing through low vegetation. Somewhere far off, the low call of an animal echoes briefly before fading again. You might wonder how people manage to survive in a place like this. The answer is both simple and complicated. They adapted, but not all at once. Researchers continue to question exactly how quickly early humans developed the skills needed to thrive in such environments. Some evidence suggests gradual improvement over thousands of years, while other findings hint at periods where progress seemed to slow or even pause. And that is where the mystery begins to settle in. Because as you move through this landscape, as real and vivid as it feels, you are also stepping into a gap. A stretch of time where the story of humanity becomes difficult to follow. You stand again and continue walking. The light is beginning to fade now, not suddenly, but with a slow, steady dimming that softens everything around you. Shadows stretch longer across the ground. The sky shifts from pale blue to deeper shades of grey and violet. And then you see it. A small group of figures gathered near a fire. You approach slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet balance of the scene. There are only a few of them, perhaps 5, maybe 6. Their movements are calm, deliberate. One is crouched near the fire, adjusting a piece of wood. Another sits slightly apart, focused on shaping a stone tool with quiet concentration. Their clothing is simple, made from animal hides loosely wrapped and tied. It offers protection from the cold, though not comfort in the way we would think of it today. You notice the fire first. It burns low and steady, its light flickering gently across their faces. The warmth reaches you as you step closer, a welcome contrast to the cooling air around you. Fire during this period was not just a source of heat, it was a center point of life. It provided protection from predators, a way to cook food, and perhaps most importantly a place where people could gather. Some historians suggest that the regular use of fire may have played a role in the development of social structures and communication. Others disagree, pointing out that evidence for this connection remains limited and open to interpretation. You sit down quietly at the edge of the group. No one reacts with surprise. It is as if your presence blends naturally into the moment, another quiet observer in a world that has not yet learned to question such things. The fire crackles softly. You watch as one of the individuals lifts a piece of food, turning it slowly over the flames. The smell reaches you earthy and rich. It is not seasoned, not prepared in any complex way, but it is warm and it is enough. Life here is not about excess, it is about continuation. And yet even in this simplicity there is something else. A pause in movement, a moment where one of them looks up not at anything specific but outward, as if noticing something beyond immediate survival, as if thought itself is beginning to stretch just slightly into new territory. You feel it too, that quiet shift, not dramatic, not sudden, but present. This is where the story becomes harder to follow. Because while moments like this surely happened countless times across thousands of years, very little remains to tell us exactly what changed or when. The archaeological record offers fragments, tools, bones, traces of fire, but the inner world of these early humans, their thoughts, their questions, their understanding of the world remains largely hidden. And in some stretches of time, even the physical evidence grows thin, almost as if entire chapters have been gently erased. You lean back slightly, letting the warmth of the fire settle into you. The night has fully arrived now. The sky above is filled with stars, clear and bright in a way that feels almost overwhelming. No artificial light, no distant noise, just the vastness of the sky and the small circle of warmth you sit within. You might think of how different this is from the modern world, where light is constant, where silence is rare, where history is recorded in detail and stored almost endlessly. Here nothing is written, nothing is preserved with certainty. Everything exists only in the moment and then fades. And yet somehow this is where everything begins. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the soft rhythm of the fire, the quiet breathing of the group around you, the distant sounds of a world that feels both ancient and alive. And as you sit there, you begin to understand something subtle. The story of humanity is not just what we remember, it is also what we have lost. You remain beside the fire for a while, letting the warmth settle gently into your skin as the night deepens around you. The flames move in slow, steady patterns, rising and folding back into themselves, casting soft light that flickers across the faces nearby. No one speaks, or at least not in a way that feels familiar. There are sounds small and subtle, but they do not form clear words. Instead, they seem to carry meaning through tone, rhythm, and gesture. After some time, one of the figures begins to gather a few scattered items from the ground. Another stands stretching slowly, looking out into the darkness as if measuring something unseen. The group is preparing to move. You rise with them. There is no signal, no formal decision, and yet the shift happens naturally. One by one they begin to step away from the fire, leaving behind only faint traces. The glowing embers remain for a moment longer, then slowly dim as the group disappears into the open land. You follow at a quiet distance. The ground feels different now under your feet. Cooler, slightly damp in places, with patches of grass brushing softly against your legs. The night air carries new sounds, a distant rustle, the low, steady hum of insects. Somewhere far off, a heavy movement suggests something much larger passing through the darkness. These early humans did not travel randomly. They moved with purpose, often guided by their knowledge of the land-water sources and the movements of animals. During this period, small groups would follow seasonal patterns, returning to familiar areas at certain times of the year. This way of life is often described as nomadic, though it was far from aimless wandering, and still many details remain unclear. Researchers continue to question how structured these movements truly were. Some evidence points to repeated migration routes used over generations, while other findings suggest a more flexible, adaptive approach depending on changing conditions. You notice how carefully the group moves. Each step is deliberate quiet. They do not rush. One of them pauses, occasionally crouching low to examine the ground. Tracks, perhaps. Subtle signs that would be easy to miss if you did not know what to look for. You try to see what they see. A slight indentation in the soil, a broken stem, a faint disturbance in the pattern of grass. Clues, the kind that guide survival. In a world like this, awareness is everything. You continue walking for what feels like a long time though. Time itself begins to lose its usual meaning. There are no clocks, no markers to divide the hours. Only the slow movement of the sky and the steady rhythm of your own steps. Eventually the group begins to slow. Ahead, the land dips gently into a shallow valley. The air feels cooler here and you can hear it before you see it. The soft, continuous sound of water. A stream. The group approaches cautiously, spreading out slightly as they move closer. One kneels at the edge, touching the surface briefly before bringing their hand to their mouth. Others follow, drinking slowly. You kneel as well. The water is cold, clear, carrying a faint mineral taste. It refreshes you in a way that feels immediate and grounding. For early humans, access to fresh water was one of the most important factors in determining where to travel and where to rest. Streams, rivers, and lakes shaped their movement across entire regions. And yet even something as essential as water could not always be relied upon. Climate during this period was far from stable. Shifts in temperature, rainfall, and ice coverage could transform landscapes over time, altering the availability of resources. Some historians suggest that these environmental changes played a major role in shaping human migration patterns, while others believe social and technological developments were equally important. You sit back listening to the steady flow of the stream. The group remains here for a while, resting, drinking, observing. One individual begins to gather small stones from the edge of the water, turning them over, carefully selecting only a few. Tools again, always tools. It becomes clear that nothing is wasted. Every movement has purpose, even if it appears slow or simple. After some time, the group settles nearby. Not building permanent structures, but arranging themselves in a way that offers some protection. A slight rise in the ground blocks part of the wind. A cluster of rocks forms a natural barrier. You notice how they position themselves, close enough to remain connected, far enough to allow space. There is a quiet understanding here, something unspoken but consistent. Early human groups were typically small, often consisting of a few families or loosely connected individuals. This size allowed them to move efficiently while still maintaining cooperation. Food sharing, collective hunting, and mutual protection were all essential for survival. You watch as one of them begins to work on a tool. They sit with a piece of stone in one hand, another stone in the other, striking carefully. Each impact is controlled, producing small flakes that fall softly to the ground. It is a slow process requiring focus and precision. You might think of how different this is from modern tools, where everything is manufactured uniform, ready to use. Here each tool is made by hand, each one slightly different. Each one a reflection of skill and experience. Some researchers believe that the complexity of stone tools can offer insight into cognitive development, suggesting that more refined tools indicate more advanced thinking. Others caution that tool variation may reflect available materials rather than mental capacity. You watch closely. There is a rhythm to it. Strike, pause, adjust, strike again. It is almost calming. As the night continues, the group grows quieter. Some lie down, resting against the ground or leaning against one another. Others remain awake, watching, listening. You lie back as well, looking up at the sky. The stars feel closer here, brighter, more present. Without artificial light, the night sky becomes something vast and detailed, a constant presence that early humans would have seen every night. It is easy to imagine how patterns might begin to form in the mind. Shapes, connection, perhaps even early attempts to understand something beyond the immediate world. And yet we do not know exactly when or how that kind of thinking developed. Scholars remain divided on when humans began to interpret the sky in symbolic ways. Some suggest it happened much later, while others believe the roots of this awareness may go back far earlier than we can currently prove. You let your eyes drift slowly across the stars. There is no urgency here, no pressure to understand everything, just observation. Just presence. And as you lie there surrounded by a world that feels both simple and complex, you begin to notice something again. That same quiet absence, not in what is here, but in what is missing. Because for all the movement, all the small details, all the signs of life, there is still a sense that something in this long stretch of time remains just out of reach. A part of the story that has not fully revealed itself. You close your eyes, listening to the soft sounds of the group around you, the steady flow of the stream, the distant movements of the night, and you continue drifting gently forward deeper into a past that still holds its secrets. Morning arrives slowly, almost quietly, as if the world itself is careful not to disturb the stillness. You open your eyes to a pale, soft light spreading across the landscape. The air feels cooler now, carrying a faint sharpness that lingers on your skin. A thin layer of moisture rests on the ground, clinging to grass and stone alike. The group is already awake. There is no sudden movement, no rush, just a gradual return to awareness. One by one, they begin to sit up, stretch, and look out across the land. The stream continues its gentle flow nearby, unchanged, steady, reliable. You sit up as well. For a moment, everything feels calm, almost peaceful in a way that is difficult to describe. But beneath that calm, there is something constant, a quiet readiness, a need to move, to act, to continue. One of the individuals stands and walks a short distance away, scanning the horizon. Another begins sorting through the small collection of tools gathered the night before. The stones are arranged carefully, each one chosen for a reason. You move closer to watch. The tools are simple but not random. Some are sharper, designed for cutting. Others are thicker, used for breaking or scraping. The edges catch the morning light in a subtle way, revealing the careful shaping that went into their creation. During this period of human history, stone tools were not only essential for survival, they were also one of the few lasting traces left behind. Archaeologists often rely on these tools to understand how early humans lived where they travelled, and how their abilities changed over time. And yet, even with thousands of discovered tools, many questions remain. Researchers continue to question how knowledge of tool-making was shared. Was it taught directly, passed from one generation to the next through observation and imitation? Or did individuals discover techniques independently, learning through trial and error? You watch as one member of the group sits beside a younger individual. There is no formal instruction, no clear demonstration, but there is something happening. The older figure works slowly, deliberately, while the younger one watches closely, occasionally attempting the same motion. Sometimes the stone slips, sometimes it fractures in the wrong way, but there is no frustration, only repetition. A quiet form of learning. You notice how focused they are. There are no distractions here, no competing sounds, no interruptions, just the task, the material, and the gradual refinement of movement. You might think of how different learning feels today, where information is immediate, often overwhelming and easily forgotten. Here knowledge takes time. It settles slowly. It becomes part of the body. As the morning continues, the group begins to prepare for movement once again. There is little to gather as they carry only what they need. A few tools, some remnants of food, everything light enough to move without slowing them down. This kind of mobility was essential. Early human groups depended on their ability to adapt quickly to changing environments. Staying too long in one place could lead to depleted resources, increased risk, or exposure to shifting conditions. Movement was not just a choice, it was a necessity. Some historians suggest that this constant movement may have shaped early human thinking, encouraging flexibility, awareness, and problem-solving. Others argue that the relationship between mobility and cognition is more complex, influenced by a wide range of factors, including environment, social structure, and even chance. You stand as the group begins to walk. The sun is now higher in the sky, casting a gentle warmth across the land. Shadows shorten, and the colours around you become clearer. Browns, muted greens, soft greys. A world built from natural tones, subtle and steady. As you move, you begin to notice something else. Patterns. Not obvious at first, but present. The group does not move in a straight line. Instead, they follow the contours of the land, adjusting their direction based on subtle changes. A rise in elevation, a shift in vegetation, the faint sound of animals moving somewhere ahead. You begin to understand that this landscape is not empty to them. It is filled with information. Every detail carries meaning. Every change offers a clue, and slowly as you walk, you start to see it too. A cluster of trees in the distance suggesting water nearby. A patch of disturbed earth indicating recent movement. A narrow path where the grass has been worn down not by humans but by animals following a familiar route. The group pauses again. This time their attention is focused on the ground. You step closer. There pressed into the soil are tracks. Large ones. Deep. The shape is unfamiliar, but the size alone tells you enough. Something heavy passed through here not long ago. Something that could provide food, danger, possibly both. During this time, early humans shared the landscape with a wide range of large animals often referred to as megafauna. These included creatures like mammoths, giant deer, and massive wild cattle. Hunting such animals required cooperation strategy and careful timing, but not all encounters led to successful hunts. Sometimes it was safer to observe, to wait, to avoid. You notice how the group reacts. There is no excitement, no sudden change in pace, just a quiet shift in awareness. They study the tracks briefly, then begin to move again, adjusting their direction slightly. Caution, always present, you follow, as they move along the edge of a low ridge. From here, the view opens up, revealing a wider stretch of land below. The wind is stronger at this height, carrying new scents. Dry grass, distant animals, something faintly metallic perhaps from exposed stone. You take a deep breath. The air feels different here. Clearer, colder. And as you stand there looking out across the landscape, you feel the scale of it. This is not a small world, it is vast. And for early humans, understanding even a small part of it would have taken years of observation and experience. You begin to wonder how much of this knowledge has been lost, because while tools remain and bones endure, the understanding that guided every step, every decision, every moment of survival does not leave the same kind of trace. It fades, quietly, almost completely. Researchers continue to question how much early human knowledge was shared through direct experience rather than preserved in lasting forms. Some suggest that entire systems of understanding may have existed only to disappear without leaving clear evidence behind. You look back briefly at the path you have taken. There is nothing there. No footprints, no markers, just land returning to stillness. And that realization settles gently into your thoughts. That so much of this time, this life, this long stretch of human existence may have passed without leaving more than the faintest impression. The group begins to descend from the ridge. You follow, feeling the ground shift slightly beneath your feet as you move downward. The air grows warmer again, the wind less intense. Ahead, the land opens once more. Another journey. Another movement, and as you continue walking with them, you carry a growing awareness that you are moving not just through space, but through a part of history that remains incomplete, a story still waiting to be understood. The light softens again as the day slowly stretches onward and you continue moving with the group across the open land. The ground feels warmer now beneath your feet, the coolness of morning gradually replaced by a gentle, steady heat. A faint breeze passes through, carrying with it the dry scent of grass and distant earth. No one speaks, and yet there is no silence. There is always something to hear if you listen closely enough. The soft crunch of footsteps, the shifting of fabric made from animal hides, the occasional call of a bird circling high above. These sounds form a quiet rhythm, one that settles into your awareness without demanding attention. After some time, the group begins to slow again. Ahead, the land dips slightly, forming a shallow hollow protected from the wind. A few scattered rocks sit at its edge, and the ground appears darker here as though it has held moisture for longer. One of the individuals steps forward and kneels, touching the soil, then looking around with quiet consideration. This is where they will stop, not permanently, but for now. You step into the hollow with them feeling the difference immediately. The air is stiller here, the temperature slightly more stable. It is a small advantage, but in a world like this, even the smallest comfort matters. Without hesitation, the group begins to prepare the space. One gathers dry plant material, Another arranges stones into a loose circle. A third begins striking 2 stones together, producing small sparks that briefly glow and vanish. You watch closely. Fire does not come easily. It takes time, patience, care. Eventually, a faint thread of smoke appears, rising slowly from the gathered material. It thickens, then suddenly a small flame catches. It flickers weakly at first, then grows stronger as more fuel is added. You feel the warmth almost immediately. Fire, by this stage of human history, had already become an essential part of daily life. Evidence suggests that early humans were using controlled fire for cooking and warmth tens of thousands of years ago. It allowed them to survive in colder climates, extend their activity into the night, and process food in ways that made it easier to digest. But beyond these practical uses, there is something else, something quieter, something harder to measure. You sit near the fire as it grows, watching the way the light dances across the ground. The flames move unpredictably, yet with a kind of softness that draws your attention inward rather than outward. One of the individuals sits beside you holding a small piece of food over the fire. The smell begins to rise slowly, rich and unfamiliar but not unpleasant. Cooking food in this way changes more than just taste. It alters texture, makes certain nutrients more accessible, and reduces the effort required to eat. An often overlooked detail is that this shift in diet may have had long-term effects on human development, possibly influencing energy levels and even brain growth over time. You watch as the food is carefully turned, never left unattended. Nothing here is done without awareness, and yet despite this growing control over fire, there are limits. Maintaining it requires constant attention. If the flame dies, it must be started again, and that process is never guaranteed to succeed quickly. Some specialists propose that early humans may have carried embers with them during travel, preserving fire, rather than recreating it from nothing each time. Others remain unconvinced, pointing out the lack of direct evidence for such practices. You glance at the group. It's easy to imagine how important this small flame is to them, not just for warmth, but for continuity. As the fire settles into a steady burn, the group begins to relax. Some sit close, extending their hands toward the heat. Others remain slightly apart, watching the surroundings with quiet focus. You begin to notice the light more clearly now. It does not reach far. Beyond a small circle, the world fades into shadow, the edges of the hollow blur blending into the larger landscape. It creates a boundary not physical but perceptual. Inside the light there is safety. Outside uncertainty. You might wonder how often early humans sat like this, surrounded by darkness, aware of what they could not see, and how that awareness shaped their thoughts. Researchers continue to explore the connection between fire and human social behavior. Some believe that time spent around fire encouraged longer periods of interaction, allowing for the development of more complex communication. Others suggest that while fire provided the setting, it was not the direct cause of these changes. You lean back slightly, letting the warmth settle into your body. The ground beneath you is firm but not uncomfortable. A thin layer of plant material softens the surface just enough. The air carries a mix of scents now. Smoke, earth, something faintly sweet from the burning vegetation. It is calming, in a way that feels unexpected. One of the individuals begins to move again, not with urgency, but with purpose. They pick up a stone tool and begin working on a piece of material you cannot immediately identify. It might be animal hide. It might be plant fiber. The motion is slow and repetitive, the tool scraping gently across the surface. You watch for a while. The sound is soft, almost rhythmic. Tasks like this would have been a regular part of daily life. Preparing materials, maintaining tools, repairing worn items. Each activity contributes to survival in a small but essential way. Less commonly noted is how much time early humans likely spent on these quiet tasks. Not hunting, not traveling, but maintaining the things that made those activities possible. This is a different pace. Slower, more deliberate. As the light begins to fade again, the fire becomes more central. Its glow deepens, casting longer shadows that move slowly across the ground. The group shifts slightly, adjusting their positions to stay within the warmth. You feel the temperature drop around you. Subtle at first, then more noticeable. Night is returning, and with it a familiar stillness. You look up. The sky is beginning to darken, the first stars appearing faintly above. They seem distant yet constant, unchanged by anything happening below. You wonder if the people around you notice them in the same way, if they recognize patterns, if they attach meaning, or if the stars are simply part of the background no more significant than the stones beneath your feet. Evidence is limited. Some researchers suggest that symbolic thinking related to the sky may have developed much later, while others point to early indications that humans may have begun observing and remembering patterns far earlier than we can confirm. You let your gaze linger for a moment, then return to the fire. The group is settling in now. Some lie down, curling slightly to conserve warmth. Others remain seated, watching, listening. There is no clear division between rest and wakefulness. It flows naturally, shifting as needed. You lower yourself to the ground. The warmth from the fire reaches you, though more softly now. The sounds around you begin to fade into a steady background. The crackle of burning wood, the faint movement of wind beyond the hollow, the quiet presence of others nearby. And once again you feel that subtle awareness that while moments like this must have happened countless times across countless places, so little of it remains. No record of these conversations that never formed into words. No trace of the thoughts that passed quietly through their minds. Only fragments, only hints. You close your eyes and allow yourself to drift gently forward deeper into a time that continues to reveal itself slowly, one quiet moment at a time. You wake again to this quiet transition between night and morning, that soft in-between moment where the world feels suspended. The fire has burned low, reduced to a bed of glowing embers that pulse faintly in the dim light. A thin thread of smoke rises into the cool air, barely visible as it fades into the pale sky. The group is still, not fully asleep, not fully awake. You shift slightly, feeling the firmness of the ground beneath you, the faint warmth that still lingers from the fire. The air carries a gentle chill brushing against your skin in a way that feels both sharp and calming. One of the individuals stirs. They sit up slowly, looking around, not with urgency, but with awareness. Their gaze moves across the hollow toward the edge where the land rises, then upward to the sky. It is a simple act, but it carries a sense of orientation, of placing oneself within the world before anything else begins. You sit up as well. The light grows, gradually revealing the shapes around you with increasing clarity. The stones, the scattered tools, the faint impressions in the ground where bodies rested through the night. Nothing here is permanent, and yet everything leaves a trace, even if only for a short while. As the group begins to wake, there is a quiet shift in energy. Movement returns slowly. Someone adds a small piece of dry material to the embers, coaxing the fire back to life. Another checks the surrounding area, stepping just beyond the hollow and pausing briefly before returning. You notice the way they communicate, not through long exchanges, not through complex language, but through small gestures. A glance, a slight movement of the hand, a change in posture. It is enough. Early human communication during this time likely relied heavily on nonverbal cues supported by vocal sounds that carried emotion or intent rather than detailed information. Fully developed language as we understand it today may not have been present yet, though its beginnings were likely forming. And this is where something subtle begins to emerge. You watch as two members of the group sit facing each other. One picks up a small object, a piece of stone perhaps, or something shaped from bone. They turn it slowly in their hands, then make a short sound, followed by a gesture. The other responds with a similar sound, though slightly different in tone. There is a pattern here. Not random, not fully structured, but something in between, an early attempt perhaps to share meaning. Some specialists suggest that the roots of language may have developed gradually from gestures and simple vocalizations like these. Others argue that language may have emerged more suddenly triggered by changes in brain structure or social complexity. You listen carefully. The sounds are soft, almost blending into the background, but they carry intention, a rising tone, a repeated rhythm, a pause, then a response. It feels like the beginning of something that will take thousands of years to fully form. You find yourself leaning closer as if trying to understand, but the meaning remains just out of reach. You notice something else. The group is not just communicating, they are observing each other, watching reactions, adjusting their behavior in subtle ways. This kind of awareness is important. It allows cooperation. It builds trust. It creates a shared rhythm that supports survival. An often overlooked detail is that early human groups likely depended heavily on this kind of social sensitivity. Being able to read others, even without complex language, would have been essential in avoiding conflict and maintaining group cohesion. You stand as the group begins to prepare for the day. The fire is now burning again, though smaller than before, enough to provide warmth and to cook what little food remains. One individual carefully divides the food, distributing it among the group without any visible tension or dispute. You might expect competition. Scarcity often leads to it. But here there is a balance, sharing. Whether this reflects a deep social instinct or simply a practical strategy remains uncertain. Some researchers believe that cooperation gave early humans a survival advantage over other species. Others suggest that sharing may have been situational, influenced by immediate needs, rather than consistent social rules. You take a small portion of food, feeling its warmth in your hands. It is simple, but it is enough. As the group eats, the sun rises higher, bringing with it a gentle warmth that begins to replace the morning chill. The hollow feels different now, less enclosed, more open. The shadows shrink and the colours of the land become more defined. After eating, the group begins to move again. There is no delay, no lingering. They rise, gather what they need, and step out of the hollow, leaving behind only faint signs that they were ever there. You follow. The land ahead stretches outward, familiar yet always changing. Small variations in terrain create new paths, new challenges. A patch of rough ground here, a narrow passage between rocks there. As you walk, you begin to notice something that was less clear before. The way the group positions itself. They do not move in a tight cluster. Instead, they spread out, slightly maintaining distance while still remaining connected. This allows them to cover more ground, to observe more of their surroundings, to react more quickly to changes. It is a quiet strategy, one that does not require explanation. It simply works. Evidence suggests that early humans developed a range of cooperative behaviors that allowed them to hunt, gather, and travel effectively in small groups. These behaviors were not written down or formally taught. They emerged through experience repeated over generations. You walk for some time, feeling the steady rhythm return. Step, pause, adjust, step again. The simplicity of it becomes calming. Your thoughts begin to slow, matching the pace of movement. And then something changes. One of the individuals stops abruptly, not with alarm, but with focus. The others notice immediately their movements slowing, their attention shifting in the same direction. You follow their gaze. At first you see nothing, just open land. Then slowly you begin to notice it. A faint movement in the distance, subtle, almost blending into the landscape. An animal, small, quick, moving along the edge of a low ridge. The group does not react with excitement. There is no sudden rush. Instead, there is observation. Careful, patient. They watch. You watch with them. Moments pass. The animal continues unaware, or perhaps aware but unconcerned. It is too far, too fast, not worth the risk. The group begins to move again, quietly shifting direction. You follow, and as you walk, you begin to understand something important. Not every opportunity is taken, not every chance is pursued. Survival here is not just about action. It is about choice, knowing when to move and when to let something pass. You continue forward, the landscape unfolding slowly around you, and somewhere beneath the surface of these small decisions, these quiet interactions, something deeper continues to grow. A form of understanding, a way of being, still forming, still incomplete, still hidden within a long stretch of time that has not fully revealed its story. The land opens wider as you continue forward, the gentle rise and fall of the terrain stretching into long, quiet distances. The air feels drier now, carrying less of the cool moisture from earlier, and more of a faint, dusty warmth. Each step stirs the ground, slightly lifting small traces of earth that settle again almost immediately. The group moves steadily, their pace neither fast nor slow, but measured. There is a calm certainty in the way they travel, as if each step has already been considered long before it is taken. And yet, as you look around, something begins to feel different. Not in what you see, but in what you do not. There are fewer traces here. You notice it slowly. The ground holds fewer marks. The The signs of other animals seem less frequent. Even the scattered remains that once hinted at past activity feel more distant, more rare. It is subtle, but it is there. This is where the story begins to thin. In many parts of the prehistoric record, there are long stretches of time where evidence becomes sparse. Archaeological layers that once held clear signs of human presence begin to offer less. Fewer tools, fewer remains, longer gaps between discoveries. It does not mean that humans disappeared, but it does mean something changed. You slow your pace slightly, looking more closely at the ground. A stone here, unshaped, natural, another there, possibly worked, though it is difficult to be certain. You crouch, picking it up. It is rough, uneven. There is a slight edge that could have been formed intentionally, or perhaps it is only the result of natural fracture. Without context, it becomes difficult to tell, and that uncertainty is part of the mystery. Researchers continue to question whether these gaps reflect real declines in human populations or simply limitations in what has been preserved and discovered. Some propose that environmental conditions may have reduced the number of people in certain regions. Others suggest that evidence has been lost over time due to erosion, burial, or other natural processes. You turn the stone in your hand for a moment longer, then place it back where you found it. The group continues moving, unchanged, unaware of the questions that will one day be asked about this very moment. You follow your awareness, now slightly sharpened. There is a sense that you are walking through a place that holds fewer answers. The land itself feels quieter, not empty, but less defined. After some time, the group begins to slow again. Ahead, the ground shifts from dry earth to a patch of darker soil. Sparse vegetation appears low and scattered. A few small plants break through the surface, their leaves thin and pale. One of the individuals steps forward and begins to examine the area carefully. You watch as they kneel, gently pulling at one of the plants. The roots come free with a soft resistance, bringing with them a small clump of soil. Food, not abundant, but present. Gathering plant materials like root seeds and small fruits was a consistent part of early human diets. While hunting often draws more attention, plant gathering likely provided a significant portion of the daily nutrition, especially in environments where large animals were less predictable. An often overlooked detail is how much knowledge this required, knowing which plants were safe, which were useful, which could be eaten raw, and which required preparation. This knowledge was not written. It lived in memory, in repetition, in careful observation. You watch as the group gathers slowly, each individual selecting only certain plants, leaving others untouched. There is no trial and error here, no visible hesitation. The choices are precise. You might wonder how such knowledge was maintained across generations, especially in a world without permanent records. Some specialists propose that learning occurred through close observation and shared experience over long periods of time. Others suggest that the loss of even a few individuals could have led to the disappearance of specific knowledge, especially in smaller groups. You stand and look around. The land stretches outward unchanged in its quiet vastness, and again you feel that absence. Not in a dramatic way, but as a gentle fading. A sense that something once present has become harder to see. The group gathers what they can and prepares to move again. There is no attempt to collect everything. Only what is needed. Only what can be carried. This restraint is not a choice in the way we might think of it today. It is simply how life works here. You begin walking once more, the rhythm returning. Step, pause, observe, step again. The sky above is clear, the sun now higher, casting a steady light across the land. Shadows are shorter, less defined. The world feels flatter, more open. As you move, you begin to notice something else. The spacing between signs of life continues to grow. Longer stretches without tracks, without remains, without anything that clearly marks human presence. You feel it more strongly now. This is not just a moment. It is a pattern, a gradual thinning, and it raises a quiet question. Where is everyone? You glance at the group ahead of you. They are here, present, moving, living, and yet beyond them there is little to suggest others nearby. Some researchers suggest that early human populations may have been extremely small during certain periods spread thinly across large areas. This would mean that encounters between groups were rare and that many regions could go long stretches without any human presence at all. Others question this idea, proposing that our current understanding is limited by what has been discovered and that many signs of human activity may still remain hidden beneath layers of earth or lost entirely. You walk in silence, the question lingering gently in your thoughts. The land continues, unchanged, uncertain. After some time, the group pauses once more. This time there is no clear reason, no visible resource, no immediate need. They simply stop. You stop with them. For a moment, no one moves, no one gestures, no one speaks. They stand looking out across the land, waiting, listening. You try to understand what they are sensing, but there is nothing obvious. No sound, no movement, only stillness. And yet something is being read, something so subtle. Perhaps a shift in wind, perhaps a distant scent, perhaps something you cannot perceive. After a few moments, one of them takes a step forward. The others follow. The movement resumes, quietly, without explanation. You fall back into step, the rhythm returning once again. And as you continue forward, you begin to feel the weight of this long stretch of time. Not heavy, but deep. A span where so much happened and yet so little remains. Where lives were lived in full complex detail, and then faded, leaving behind only the faintest traces. You look out across the land one more time, and you realize that you are walking through a part of history that has not been forgotten, but never fully known. The air begins to change again as you continue forward, though at first it is so subtle you almost miss it. A faint coolness slips into the breeze, soft at the edges, but steady as if something larger is shifting far beyond what you can see. The ground beneath your feet feels slightly firmer now, less dry, holding a quiet hint of moisture that lingers just below the surface. The group seems to notice, not with any visible reaction, but through small adjustments in movement. Their pace shifts slightly, their direction curves gently, following a path that is not marked yet clearly understood. You follow, becoming more aware of the sky above. It's not as clear as before. Thin layers of cloud begin to stretch across it, soft and pale, diffusing the sunlight into a muted glow. The shadows on the ground soften, losing their sharp edges. This is a world in motion, not just in this way people move, but in the way the land itself changes over time. During this long period of prehistory, the Earth's climate was far from stable. Large sections of the planet were still influenced by the Ice Age, with glaciers expanding and retreating over thousands of years. These slow changes affected temperature, water availability, and the distribution of plants and animals. You begin to feel it more clearly now. The breeze carries a cooler tone, the scent of the air shifts, becoming sharper, cleaner. Somewhere ahead, the land dips again, and you can sense a change even before you see it. The group moves toward it without hesitation. When you reach the edge, you find yourself looking down into a wide, shallow basin. The ground here is different, darker, softer. Patches of vegetation spread unevenly across the surface, more abundant than what you have seen before. Water has passed through here, perhaps recently, perhaps not. You descend with the group, your steps sinking slightly into the softer ground. The texture changes beneath your feet from firm earth to something more yielding. It holds your weight for a moment, then releases it as you lift your foot again. The group spreads out, scanning the area. You notice how their movements become more deliberate here, slower, more attentive. Places like this, shaped by water and changing conditions, often held greater resources. Plants grew more easily. Animals were more likely to pass through. It offered opportunity, but also uncertainty. You watch as one individual kneels beside a patch of disturbed ground. They press their hand lightly into the soil, then lift it, examining the faint impression left behind. Another steps closer, crouching low, tracing a subtle line that runs across the surface. Tracks again, but older this time, fainter. You lean in, trying to see what they see. There is a shape there, but it is incomplete. The edges have softened, worn down by time or weather. It could belong to an animal, it could belong to something else. It is difficult to know, and that uncertainty feels familiar now. Archaeological findings indicate that environmental changes like these could quickly alter the visibility of tracks and other signs of life. Rain, wind, and shifting soil could erase evidence in a matter of days, leaving little behind for future discovery. You look around the basin. There are no clear signs of recent activity. No fresh tracks, no visible remains, just scattered hints. A broken plant stem here, a slight depression there, small details that suggest life but do not fully reveal it. You feel the quiet weight of it. This is how the past disappears, not all at once, but gradually, piece by piece. The group continues moving through the basin, collecting what they can. A few plants are gathered. A small insect is caught and examined briefly before being eaten. Every resource is considered, no matter how small. One detail that often goes unnoticed is how varied early human diets likely were. While large animals capture attention, much of daily nutrition may have come from smaller, less obvious sources like insects, roots, and seeds. You watch as one individual carefully lifts a spoon, revealing a cluster of small creatures beneath it. They move quickly, scattering in different directions. With practiced speed, a few are caught and consumed. There is no hesitation, no discomfort, only efficiency. So, you might think of how different modern diets are, how selective they have become. Here, survival leaves little room for preference. As the group moves toward the center of the basin, the sky shifts again. The light dims slightly. The clouds above thicken, gathering into larger shapes that move slowly across the sky. The breeze grows cooler, carrying with it a faint sense of change. You feel it on your skin, a subtle drop in temperature, a hint of something approaching. Rain, perhaps. The group seems to sense it too. Their movements become more purposeful, not rushed, but directed. They begin to move toward the edge of the basin, where the ground rises again, offering better protection from what might come. Climate during this time could change not only over thousands of years, but also in shorter, more immediate ways. Sudden shifts in weather could impact visibility, movement, and access to resources. Adapting to these changes was a constant part of life. There is ongoing discussion about how early humans anticipated weather patterns. Some researchers believe they relied on subtle environmental cues, while others suggest that much of their response was reactive rather than predictive. You climb with the group, the ground becoming firmer as you ascend. The air grows cooler still, and the light continues to soften as the clouds spread. When you reach the top, the group pauses. They look back briefly across the basin. You do the same. From this height, the details blur together. What once felt full of small signs now appears smooth, almost empty. It is a quiet reminder. That perspective changes everything. Up close there are traces. From a distance there is only land. You turn away and continue walking. The first faint drop of rain touches your skin. Light, barely there. Then another, and another. The sound begins softly, a gentle tapping against the ground, against stone, against the leaves of scattered plants. The group moves on, unbothered, unsurprised. This is part of the world they know. You follow the rhythm of movement blending with the rhythm of the falling rain. And as the landscape begins to shift once more under changing skies, you carry with you the growing sense that time itself is not a straight path, but something that fades and returns and fades again, leaving behind only what it can. The rain settles into a steady rhythm as you continue walking, each drop soft but persistent, tapping gently against the ground, and your skin is not heavy enough to slow you, but it changes everything in small ways. The air cools further. The scent of the earth deepens, rising with a rich, almost comforting weight. The ground beneath your feet begins to soften, holding impressions a little longer than before. You notice how the group adjusts without hesitation. Their steps become more careful, more deliberate. They avoid certain patches of ground, choosing firmer paths that wind subtly through the landscape. There is no discussion, no signal, just quiet awareness shared and understood. As the rain continues, the world around you begins to blur slightly at the edges. Distant shapes soften, the horizon becomes less defined. What was once clear and open now feels enclosed, as if the land itself is drawing inward. You follow closely, now aware that visibility has changed. This kind of weather would have affected movement in ways that are easy to overlook. Wet ground preserves tracks more clearly for a short time, but it can also erase them quickly if the rain continues. Archaeological evidence shows that many prehistoric footprints discovered today were preserved under rare conditions, often buried rapidly by sediment before they could disappear. You glance down. Your own footprints are visible behind you, faint but present. The impressions fill slowly with water, their edges softening. Already they begin to fade. You continue walking, watching how the group navigates through this shifting environment. One individual moves slightly ahead, scanning the ground and the space beyond. Another remains closer to the center, occasionally looking back, maintaining a quiet sense of connection. The spacing adjusts again, closer now. The reduced visibility changes the way they move. This is not just about direction, it is about awareness. You begin to notice new sounds. The rain itself creates a constant background, but within it there are variations. The heavier drops striking stone, the softer ones landing on soil, the faint rustle of leaves disturbed by wind and water, and beneath it all something else, a distant movement. You pause for a moment at listening. The group does the same. There is no alarm, but there is a tension. Through the rain, a shape becomes visible for a brief moment. Then another. Large forms moving slowly across the landscape, partially obscured by the shifting curtain of water. Animals, large ones. Their outlines are blurred, but their size is unmistakable. The group does not approach. They do not retreat. They simply observe. In many prehistoric environments, early humans shared space with large herds of animals that moved across wide territories. These migrations were often influenced by seasonal changes, availability of food, and environmental conditions like rainfall. A small but revealing detail is that rain like this could influence animal movement patterns, sometimes bringing them closer to areas where humans might encounter them, and at other times pushing them further away. You watch as the shapes move slowly, their presence both distant and immediate at the same time. The sound of their movement blends with the rain, heavy but muted. The group begins to shift direction, not away, but slightly aside, maintaining distance, avoiding unnecessary risk. You follow, feeling the subtle change in path beneath your feet. The ground here slopes gently upward, becoming firmer again as you leave the softer basin behind. The rain continues, though it begins to lighten slightly, the drops growing smaller, more scattered. As you move, you begin to notice something else. The land here shows faint signs of passage, not recent, but repeated. A narrow strip where the vegetation is slightly thinner. A path shaped not by intention but by use. You step onto it. It feels different. Smoother, more compact. The group follows it naturally, as if recognizing something familiar. It is not a road. Not in the way you would think of one, but it is a route, a path formed over time. Evidence suggests that early humans may have used recurring routes through landscapes following patterns shaped by resources, terrain, and memory. These paths would not have been marked or maintained, but they could still guide movement across large areas. You walk along this faint trail, feeling how it gently curves, adjusting to the natural features of the land. It avoids steep slopes, moves toward higher ground, then dips again where the terrain allows easier passage. It feels almost intentional, and yet it is not designed. It has emerged, through repetition, through necessity, through time. You begin to wonder how many such paths have existed and how many have disappeared without leaving any trace. The rain continues to fade now, leaving behind a quiet stillness. The air feels fresh-washed clean. The ground glistens faintly, reflecting the soft light that begins to return as the clouds thin. The group slows again. Ahead, the land opens into a wide stretch of grass dotted with small clusters of low vegetation. The sky above is brighter now, though still muted, the sunlight diffused through lingering clouds. They stop. You stop with them. For a moment, no one moves. They stand looking out across the open space, listening, waiting. You try to understand what they are sensing. The rain has quieted the world. Sound carries differently now, more clearly in some ways, less predictably in others. A faint movement catches your attention. Near the edge of the grassland, something shifts. Small, quick, then gone. You hold your breath without realizing it. The group remains still, not reacting immediately. This is not hesitation. It is patience. They wait. Moments pass. Then one of them takes a slow step forward. Another follows. The movement resumes. Careful, measured. You follow closely, your awareness sharpened by the stillness that lingers after the rain. As you move into the open space, you feel the ground change once more. Firmer now, more stable. Each step lands with a quiet certainty. And as you walk, you begin to sense something deeper within this landscape. Not just movement, not just survival, but memory. Not written, then, not recorded, but held within patterns. Paths, decisions repeated over time. There is ongoing discussion about how much early humans relied on memory of place versus immediate environmental cues. Some experts suggest that detailed mental maps may have formed over repeated journeys, while others believe navigation was more responsive to present conditions. You look ahead at the group. They move with confidence, not hurried, not uncertain, simply aware. And as you continue walking along this faint path through a world shaped by time and movement, you begin to understand that even when physical traces fade, something of that movement remains. Not in the ground, but in the rhythm of life itself. The ground feels steadier now as you continue across the open stretch, the moisture from the rain slowly settling deeper into the soil. The air has cleared, carrying a soft freshness that lingers with each breath. The sky above is brighter again, though still veiled in thin layers of cloud that soften the light into something calm and even. The group moves forward without hesitation. There is a quiet confidence in their pace, as if this landscape, though vast and ever-changing, is not unfamiliar to them. And yet as you look around, you begin to notice something that feels different from before. It is not the land itself, it is the sense of presence within it. There are fewer signs of others, no distant figures, no clear traces of recent activity beyond your own group, just space, wide and uninterrupted. You continue walking, your awareness stretching outward, searching for something that may or may not be there, and slowly a thought begins to form, not a sudden realization, but a quiet question. How many others are out here? During certain periods of early human history, population levels were likely very low compared to what we are used to today. Evidence suggests that small groups were spread across large territories, often separated by long distances. Encounters between groups may have been rare, and in some regions, individuals could travel for days without seeing anyone beyond their own companions. You let that settle in. The idea of such distance, such separation. It feels almost difficult to imagine, and yet here it feels natural. The group ahead of you pauses briefly, hey. Not for long, just enough to adjust direction slightly. You follow, noticing how the path curves again, responding to subtle changes in the land. A slight incline, a patch of denser vegetation, a cluster of stones that shift the route just enough to matter. There is a quiet logic to it, not imposed, but discovered. As you walk, your eyes drift downward. The ground is firmer now, holding fewer impressions. The rain has settled and the surface has begun to dry. Where footprints were once visible, there is now only a faint smoothing, as if the land has gently erased what passed over it. This is how time works here, not as a sharp divide, but as a slow blending. You look back for a moment. There is nothing to mark your path, no clear line, no indication of where you came from. Only the present moment remains. You turn forward again. The group begins to spread out, slightly scanning the area with renewed attention. One moves ahead, another drifts to the side, creating a wider field of awareness. It is a subtle shift, but it changes the feeling of movement. More alert, more focused. You begin to notice small details again. A cluster of broken stems, a faint indentation in the soil, not as clear as before, but present. You step closer, crouching slightly. The marks are shallow, almost faded. They could be from animals. They could be from humans. It is difficult to tell. And that difficulty feels familiar. There is ongoing discussion about how often early human traces have been misidentified or overlooked entirely. Subtle signs can be mistaken for natural formations, while genuine evidence may fade before it is ever recognized. You stand again, letting the uncertainty settle. The group continues forward, their movements unchanged. They do not question in the way you do. They respond to what is present, to what can be seen, to what can be sensed. As you walk, the land begins to shift once more. The open grass gives way to scattered patches of taller vegetation. Small shrubs rise from the ground, their branches thin and slightly tangled. The space feels more enclosed now, not fully restricted, but less open than before. The light filters differently here, soft, broken. You move between the plants, brushing lightly against them as you pass. The texture is dry, slightly rough against your skin. The scent changes again, carrying a faint bitterness mixed with the lingering freshness from the rain. The group slows. Ahead, one of them stops. This time the reason becomes clear. On the ground, partially hidden beneath a cluster of plants, lies something still. You approach carefully. It is the remains of an animal. Not fresh, but not fully gone either. The body is still intact, though the signs of time are visible. The surface has begun to change. The scent is faint, carried away by the recent rain, but present enough to notice. The group gathers around it, quietly, observing. This is not a hunt, but it is an opportunity. Early humans did not rely solely on hunting. Scavenging was also a part of survival, allowing them to use resources that were already available. It required awareness, timing, and caution, especially when dealing with animals that may have been left behind by larger predators. A small but revealing detail is that tools found near such remains sometimes show signs of repeated use for cutting and scraping, suggesting that these moments were not rare, but part of a broader pattern of resourcefulness. You watch as one individual kneels beside the animal, examining it carefully. They do not act immediately. They assess, looking for signs of danger, looking for indications that another predator might return. You feel the stillness in the air, a kind of quiet tension, not fear, but awareness. After a few moments, the individual begins to work. Using a stone tool, they carefully cut into the surface, moving slowly, deliberately. Others remain nearby, watching, listening, maintaining awareness of the surroundings. You stay slightly back, observing. The process is not rushed. It cannot be. Precision matters. Efficiency matters. Nothing can be wasted. Understood. You notice how each movement is controlled, practiced. This is not the first time. It is a skill developed over many similar moments, refined through repetition. And yet as you watch, another thought begins to form. How many of these moments have happened across the vast stretch of time you're moving through? How many were never seen, never recorded, never preserved? The group works quietly, taking only what they can carry, leaving the rest behind. When they're finished, they stand, stepping back from the remains. There is no ceremony, no reflection, just continuation. They move on. You follow. The land opens slightly again as you leave the sheltered area behind. The light grows clearer, the air warmer. The rhythm of walking returns steady and familiar, and as you move forward, you carry with you a growing sense of something deeper. That this long stretch of time, this period where evidence fades and presence thins, is not empty. It is full of moments like this. Small, quiet, essential, but so rarely seen. And as you continue walking, you begin to understand that the mystery is not just in what is missing. It is in how much was lived and how little remains. You move on from the quiet remains of the animal, the scent fading behind you as the land opens once more. The air feels warmer now, touched by a gentle steadiness that lingers after the rain. Each step carries a soft rhythm, familiar, grounding, almost meditative. The group continues forward their formation, returning to a natural spread. There is no sign of urgency, no sign of hesitation, only movement steady and continuous, as if guided by something deeper than immediate thought. As you walk, the landscape begins to shift again. At first, it is subtle, a change in the height of the grass, a difference in the spacing of plants. Then slowly something larger reveals itself. In the distance, shapes begin to form, not still, not part of the land, moving. You narrow your gaze. The shapes grow clearer with each step, large bodies moving in a slow, coordinated flow across the open terrain. Their size becomes more apparent as you draw closer, their forms heavy, grounded, powerful. A herd, massive animals far larger than anything you've seen up close so far. The group slows immediately, not out of fear, but out of respect. You feel it too, a quiet awareness of scale, of presence. Creatures like these were a defining part of this world. During the Ice Age, vast herds of large animals moved across continents, shaping the landscape through their movement. Mammoths, giant bison, and other megafauna dominated many regions, providing both opportunity and risk for early humans. You watch as the herd moves. Their steps are slow but constant, each one pressing deeply into the earth. The ground seems to respond to their weight, shifting slightly with each movement. The sound is low, steady, like distant thunder softened by distance. The group remains still for a moment, observing, assessing. There is no attempt to approach, no immediate plan to hunt, only awareness. You begin to notice how the individuals around you position themselves. They do not cluster. They spread slightly, maintaining space while keeping the herd within view. One moves to a slightly higher point, gaining a better angle. Another stays lower, watching the edges of the group. It is not a formal strategy, But it's not random either. Findings from prehistoric sites reveal that early humans developed coordinated behaviors when interacting with large animals, even without structured language. These behaviors allowed them to observe, track, and sometimes hunt creatures much larger than themselves. You watch as one of the individuals crouches low, placing a hand on the ground, feeling, perhaps sensing vibrations, perhaps grounding themselves in the moment. You try it too. Your hand rests against the earth, and for a moment you think you can feel it. A faint trembling carried through the soil as the herd moves. It is subtle, but real. Something rarely emphasized is how much early humans may have relied on senses beyond sight. The ability to feel the movement through the ground, to detect shifts in sound, to read patterns in ways that are difficult to describe today. You lift your hand and look again. The herd continues moving, gradually shifting direction, their path curving gently across the land. They do not acknowledge your presence, or perhaps they do but do not see it as a threat. Either way, there is distance, and distance here is safety. The group begins to move again, slowly adjusting their path to follow the herd at a careful distance. Not directly behind, not directly beside it, just close enough to observe. You follow your steps, quieter now, more deliberate. There is something different about this movement. More focused, more attentive. You begin to understand why. Herds like this are not just animals. They are patterns, paths, indicators of where food and water might be found. Archaeological evidence points to the importance of following animal movements during this period. Early humans often relied on these patterns to guide their own journeys, using the behavior of animals as a way to understand the landscape. You watch as the herd approaches a gentle slope, their pace slowing slightly as they move upward. The group mirrors this change, maintaining their distance. No one rushes ahead. No one lags behind. There is a quiet synchronization. As you continue, you begin to notice small details. The way the animals move in relation to one another. The way the group responds to those movements. It is not direct imitation, but it is connected. A shared awareness of rhythm. You might wonder how long it took for humans to develop this level of understanding. The answer is not clear. Interpretations differ on this point. Some suggest that such awareness developed gradually over countless generations, shaped by a repeated exposure and necessity. Others believe that certain insights may have emerged more quickly, driven by the immediate demands of survival. You walk for some time alongside this moving presence, not part of it, but not entirely separate either. The land changes again as you follow. The grass becomes shorter, the ground firmer. The slope levels out into a wide open stretch that seems to extend endlessly in all directions. The sky above clears further, the clouds thinning, until only faint traces remain. The sunlight grows stronger, though still gentle, casting a warm glow across the scene. The herd begins to spread out. Their formation loosens, individuals drifting slightly apart as they move across the open land. Some lower their heads to graze, others continue walking slower, now less directed. The group stops. This time they do not follow further. They watch. You stand with them, looking out across the vast space. The scale of it feels almost overwhelming. So much land, so few people, so many lives moving through it, leaving only the faintest traces behind. You take a slow breath, letting the moment settle. And as you stand there, you begin to feel something deeper beneath the surface of what you see. A sense that this world full of movement and life is also fragile in ways that are not immediately visible. Because herds move, land changes, people adapt, but not everything continues forever. Some patterns fade, some disappear, and when they do, they take with them pieces of the story that can never be fully recovered. You turn slightly, looking back along the path you have travelled. There is nothing there, no clear sign of where you came from. Only distance, only memory. You face forward again as the group begins to move once more, leaving the herd behind. The rhythm returns. Step, pause, observe, step again. And as you continue walking, you carry with you the quiet awareness that even in a world so full of life, there are still spaces where the story grows faint, where presence becomes harder to trace, where time itself seems to soften the edges of everything that once was. You leave the wide openness behind, and the land begins to gather itself into quieter shapes. The ground rises gently, forming uneven ridges of stone and packed earth. The air feels slightly cooler here, shaded in places where rock formations interrupt the sunlight. Your steps echo more softly now, the surface beneath you firmer, less forgiving. The group slows, not suddenly, but with a quiet sense of recognition. Ahead, the land narrows into a shallow rise of stone broken by darker openings that seem to absorb the light rather than reflect it. At first they appear as shadows, then as you move closer their form becomes clear. Caves, you feel the shift immediately, a subtle change in atmosphere. The openness of the plains gives way to something more enclosed, more still. The group approaches one of the openings carefully, not rushing, not hesitating, but aware. One steps forward first, pausing just at the edge. They look inside, listening, watching. You stand just behind your eyes, adjusting slowly. The interior is dim, but not entirely dark. The entrance allows a thin stretch of light to reach inward, revealing uneven stone surfaces and a ground that appears smoother than the land outside. After a moment, the individual steps inside. The others follow. You move with them, crossing the threshold where light fades into shadow. The temperature drops slightly. The air feels still, carrying a faint mineral scent mixed with something older, something that has lingered here for a long time. Inside, the space opens more than you expected. Not large, but enough. The ceiling rises just enough to stand comfortably in most places. The walls curve naturally, shaped by time and slow geological change. The ground is mostly clear, with only scattered stones and traces of dust. You notice something. Marks, faint, barely visible at first. On the wall, you step closer, letting your eyes adjust further. There along the surface are lines, shallow, irregular. Some appear intentional, others less so. You reach out, not touching, just observing. They are not drawings in the way you might expect. No clear shapes, no defying. Find images, just marks, and yet they feel deliberate. It's generally understood that early humans used caves as temporary shelters, offering protection from weather predators and shifting environmental conditions. These spaces also preserve traces of activity better than open landscapes, allowing some evidence to survive where it would otherwise be lost. You walk slowly along the wall, following the faint lines. One subtle aspect often overlooked is that not all markings found in caves are clearly artistic or symbolic. Some may have been accidental. Others could have served purposes we no longer recognize. The boundary between intention and chance becomes difficult to define. You glance back at the group. They are settling in. One gathers small pieces of dry material from a sheltered corner. Another arranges stones in a loose circle once again. The process is familiar now, quiet, repeated. Fire will return here, and with it light. You move toward the entrance again briefly, noticing how the outside world feels distant from within the cave. The sounds are softened. The wind no longer reaches you. The light is controlled, limited. It creates a different kind of space, a place where attention shifts inward. You step back as the first sparks begin again. Stone strikes stone, a faint glow, then another. The flame catches more quickly this time, fed by dry material protected from the rain. It grows slowly, casting a soft, warm light across the walls. The markings become clearer. Still simple, still uncertain, but present. You sit near the fire, watching how the light moves across the surface of the stone. Shadows shift and stretch, changing the appearance of the marks, making them seem almost alive for a moment, then still again. You begin to wonder, were these marks made with intention? Were they attempts to record something, to express something? Or were they simply the result of movement of tools, brushing against stone of hands, tracing surfaces without deeper meaning? The evidence leaves room for multiple possibilities. Some researchers believe that early markings like these may represent the earliest forms of symbolic thought. Others remain cautious, suggesting that without clearer patterns, it is difficult to assign meaning. You let the question settle without needing an answer. The group continues their quiet tasks. One individual begins working on a piece of material again, the scraping sound echoing softly within the cave. Another sits near the entrance, watching the outside world, maintaining that constant awareness. You notice how the space changes behavior. Inside, movement slows. Voices, if they can be called that, soften further. Even breathing feels more noticeable. It is a different rhythm, more contained. You might think of how spaces like this could have influenced early human experience. A place where sound carries differently, where light is limited, where the outside world is reduced to a narrow frame at the entrance. Researchers have shown that cave environments can alter perception in subtle ways, shaping how sound and light are experienced. Some have suggested that this may have contributed to early forms of reflection or awareness, though this idea remains open to interpretation. You lean back slightly, letting the warmth of the fire settle around you. The cave feels stable, unchanging. Unlike the open land, where everything shifts with weather and time, this space holds its form. It offers a kind of consistency. A pause in movement. You watch the light again, the way it dances across the walls, catching the edges of stone, revealing textures that are invisible in darkness. And then, for a brief moment, you notice something new. A pattern. Not clear. Not complete, but different from the others. A series of lines that curve slightly intersecting in a way that feels less random. You lean forward, looking closer, trying to understand, but as the fire flickers, the pattern shifts again, blending back into the surrounding marks. Uncertain. Just like everything else, you sit back, letting the moment pass. The group begins to settle for rest. Some lie down near the walls, others remain seated watching the fire as it burns steadily. You lower yourself to the ground once more. The stone beneath you is cool but not uncomfortable. The warmth of the fire reaches you, balancing the chill. The sounds are different here. The crackle of fire echoes softly. The faint movements of others are amplified just enough to be noticed. Outside, the world continues, but it feels distant now. You close your eyes, and as you rest within this quiet shelter surrounded by faint traces of those who came before you, begin to feel the weight of something deeper. That even in places where evidence survives, it does not always speak clearly. That meaning does not always remain, and that some parts of the story, even when preserved, still remain just beyond understanding. The cave holds its quiet through the night, a steady stillness that feels different from the open land. You wake slowly, not to sound, but to a subtle shift in light. A pale glow reaches inward from the entrance, soft and diffused, touching the stone walls in gentle layers. The fire has faded again. Only a few dim embers remain glowing faintly in the cool air. You sit up, feeling the firmness of the ground beneath you, the chill that has settled into the space overnight. The air is still carrying a faint trace of smoke and something older, something that lingers in enclosed places like this. The group is already beginning to stir. Movement returns quietly, almost instinctively. One individual leans forward, adding dry material to the embers, coaxing them back to life. Another stands and stretches, glancing towards the entrance where the light continues to grow. You watch as the fire returns, slowly building into a small, steady flame. The warmth follows, subtle at first, then enough to soften the edge of the cold. You stand and walk toward the entrance, pausing just at the threshold. Outside, the world feels open again, the sky pale and wide, the air fresher, carrying the scent of damp earth from the previous rain. It is a quiet contrast. Inside, stillness. Outside, movement. You step back into the cave as the group begins to prepare for the day. There is no rush, but there is purpose. Tools are gathered. Materials are checked. Nothing is left behind unless it no longer serves a need. This kind of routine, though simple, forms the structure of daily life. It's generally understood that early human survival depended not only on hunting or gathering, but on maintaining tools, preserving resources, and staying aware of changing conditions. These quieter tasks, often overlooked, were just as essential as the more visible moments of action. You notice one individual carefully examining a stone tool. They turn it in their hand, running their fingers along its edge, testing its sharpness. A slight adjustment is made, a small strike to refine the shape. It is a continuous process. Nothing remains perfect for long. Everything requires attention. A quieter detail emerges when you look closer. Some tools show signs of repeated reshaping over time, suggesting they were used, repaired, and adapted rather than discarded. This reflects a practical understanding of materials and effort, where each object carries value beyond its initial form. You watch for a moment longer, then turn your attention back to the entrance. The light has grown stronger now, illuminating the cave more fully. The marks on the walls are still visible, though less pronounced in the brighter light. They seem quieter now, less mysterious, yet no more clear in their meaning. The group begins to move. One by one, they step out into the open, leaving the cave behind. You follow. The transition feels immediate. The air is cooler outside, but fresher. the space wider, more expansive. The sounds return in layers, wind moving across the land, distant calls of animals, the faint rustle of vegetation. You take a slow breath and step forward. The land ahead stretches gently, rising and falling in soft patterns. The ground is firm again, dried by the returning sunlight. The traces of rain remain only in small pockets, dark patches that slowly fade as the day progresses. The group moves with familiarity. There is no hesitation in leaving the cave. It was never meant to be permanent, only a pause. You walk for some time, the rhythm returning once more. Step, pause, observe, step again. The repetition settles into you, calming your thoughts, slowing your awareness. And as you move, you begin to notice how the group organizes itself again, not in a fixed formation, but in a fluid arrangement that adjusts constantly. One moves slightly ahead, another lingers behind, while the rest spread out between. This pattern is not rigid, but it is consistent. Research has shown that small group coordination like this allows for greater awareness of surroundings, increasing the chances of detecting both opportunities and threats. It is a quiet system shaped by experience rather than instruction. You follow closely, noticing how each individual remains aware of the others without needing to look constantly. There is a sense of connection that does not rely on direct attention. You continue walking for a while, the landscape gradually shifting once more. The ground becomes uneven, scattered with stones of varying sizes. The vegetation thins, giving way to more exposed earth. The colours of the land shift toward muted browns and greys. Then something changes. One of the individuals stops, not abruptly, but with focus. To Mats. The others respond immediately, slowing, adjusting, gathering slightly closer. You stop as well. There is no visible movement ahead, no obvious sound, and yet something has been noticed. You listen, carefully. At first nothing, then faintly a sound. Not close, but present. A low rhythmic noise. It takes a moment to recognize it. Water, moving, not like the small stream from before. Something larger. The group begins to move toward it, slowly. Deliberately, you follow your awareness sharpening as the sound grows clearer. The land slopes downward again, the air growing cooler with each step. The scent changes, carrying moisture freshness, a subtle hint of minerals. When you reach the edge, you see it, a wider stream, not a river, but larger than what you have seen before. The water moves steadily, its surface broken by small ripples that catch the light. The sound is constant, soothing, filling the space in a way that feels grounding. The group approaches carefully. Water like this offers more than just hydration. It attracts life. Animals, plants, possibilities. Archaeological evidence points to the importance of such water sources in shaping early human movement. Areas like this would have been revisited, remembered, relied upon. You kneel beside the water, watching it flow. Clear, continuous, unchanged by your presence. You reach out, letting your fingers touch the surface. Cold, refreshing. You bring your hand to your face, feeling the chill against your skin. The group drinks quietly. No rush. No competition, just presence. You sit back, listening to the sound. And as you do, you begin to feel something shift again. Not in the land, not in the group, but in your understanding. Because places like this, though, steady and reliable, are also part of a larger pattern. They appear, they change, they sometimes disappear. There is ongoing discussion about how stable these water sources were over long periods. Some experts suggest that shifts in climate could alter or even eliminate them, forcing groups to adapt quickly. Others believe that certain sources remained consistent enough to support repeated use over generations. You watch the water flow, and for a moment it feels timeless. But you know it is not. Nothing here is. The group begins to move again, leaving the water behind, carrying with them only what they need. You stand and follow. The rhythm returns. Step, pause, observe. Step again. And as you continue walking, you carry with you the quiet awareness that even the most constant elements of this world are part of a story that is always changing, always moving, always just beyond being fully known. The sound of the wider stream fades gradually behind you as the group moves on, returning once more to the open rhythm of the land. The air feels balanced now, neither too cool nor too warm, carrying a steady calm that settles easily into your breath. Each step falls into place without effort, as if your body has begun to understand this pace without needing to think about it. The ground shifts gently beneath your feet, smoother in some places, rougher in others. The land does not stay the same for long, and yet the changes feel continuous rather than abrupt. You begin to notice how easily the group adapts to these small variations, adjusting their movement without pause. It becomes second nature. After some time, the group begins to slow again. This time there is no immediate sign of food or water, no visible animal movement, no clear reason, at least not at first. Then you see it, a cluster of stone, not scattered randomly, but gathered in a way that feels different from the natural patterns around them. They form a loose arrangement low to the ground, partially covered by dust and time. You step closer. The stones are worn, their edges softened. Some are stacked slightly. Others lie flat as if placed with intention long ago. You crouch, examining them more closely. There are marks here, faint, subtle, lines that cross the surface in irregular patterns. You run your fingers lightly over one of them, feeling the shallow grooves. They are not sharp, not fresh, but they are there. Field discoveries across different regions reveal that early humans sometimes left marks on stone surfaces, though the purpose of these markings is not always clear. Some may have been functional, related to tool making. Others could represent early attempts at expression or communication. You sit back slightly, letting your eyes adjust. At first, the marks seem random, but as you look longer, you begin to notice something. Repetition, not perfect, but present. Certain lines appear again and again, crossing in similar ways, forming shapes that almost suggest a pattern. You lean closer, trying to understand. A detail that rarely receives attention is how difficult it can be to distinguish between intentional marking and natural wear. Over time, stone surfaces can change in ways that mimic human-made patterns, making interpretation uncertain. You glance at the group. They do not linger. They do not study the stones in the way you do. For them, this place is not a mystery. It is simply part of the landscape, and yet they recognize it. You can tell by the way they pause, by the way they adjust their movement slightly, passing through the area with quiet awareness. Perhaps this place has been used before. Perhaps it holds some form of meaning. Or perhaps it's only familiar. You stand and continue walking with them, but the image of the stones lingers in your mind. Those faint lines, those almost patterns. You begin to wonder how many such places exist, scattered across the land, unnoticed, uncertain, carrying traces of something that may never be fully understood. The group moves on the rhythm, returning once again. Step, pause, observe, step again. The land opens slightly ahead, revealing a gentle slope that leads into another stretch of mixed terrain. The vegetation becomes more varied here, small plants growing alongside patches of bare earth. As you walk, your attention drifts back to the idea of marking, of leaving something behind. Not just footprints, but something more lasting, more intentional. What we know from excavations suggests that clear symbolic markings, such as cave paintings or engravings, appear more prominently later in human history. But before that, there may have been simpler forms, less defined, more difficult to recognize. You look at your own hands, at the ground, at the stones around you. It would not take much, a sharp edge, a moment of time, a simple motion, to leave a mark, and yet the meaning behind it is harder to grasp. You continue walking, the thoughts settling quietly. After some time, the group slows once more. This time the reason is clearer. A large flat rock lies ahead, partially embedded in the ground. Its surface is smoother than the surrounding stones, shaped by time into a broad, even plane. One of the individuals approaches it. They kneel, and for a moment they do something you have not seen before. They reach out and draw, not with a tool, but with their finger, tracing a line across the surface. The motion is slow, deliberate. You step closer. The line is faint, formed by the slight disturbance of dust on the rock. It is not permanent. It will fade with time, with wind, with the next rain. But for now it is visible. Another line follows, then another. Simple, unstructured, but intentional. You watch closely, trying to understand. Is this practice? Is it play? Is it something else entirely? The picture is still incomplete here. Some interpretations suggest that early forms of symbolic behavior may have begun with simple gestures like these long before more complex representations appeared. Other perspectives remain cautious, noting that not every repeated action carries deeper meaning. You sit beside the rock, watching the lines take shape. They do not form a clear image, not something you can easily recognize, but they hold attention. They draw the eye, and perhaps that is enough. After a few moments, the individual stops. They stand and step away, leaving the faint lines behind. You look at them once more, then follow the group as they move on. The rock remains, the marks remain, for now, but you know they will not last. The wind will come, the dust will settle, the surface will return to what it was, and the moment will be gone. You continue walking, carrying the image with you, and as you move forward, you begin to feel the quiet weight of something deeper, that even when early humans began to leave marks, even when they reached out to shape the world around them in small ways, so much of it was temporary. So much of it faded, leaving behind only the faintest traces, and sometimes not even that. You step forward again, the rhythm steady, the land stretching endlessly ahead, and somewhere within it the beginnings of something that is still not fully visible, still forming, still just beyond understanding. You move on from the faint lines left on the stone, the image lingering gently in your mind as the landscape stretches outward once again. The air feels steady now, carrying a quiet balance that seems to settle both the land and your thoughts. The rhythm of walking returns almost immediately, familiar and grounding, each step falling into place without effort. The group spreads slightly as they continue maintaining that subtle distance that allows for awareness without separation. You follow, noticing how your own senses feel more attuned now. Small changes in sound, shifts in light, the texture of the ground beneath your feet all seem clearer than before. After some time, the land begins to change again. The ground becomes uneven, broken by clusters of stone that rise gently from the surface. The vegetation thins, leaving more exposed earth pale and dry. The sky above opens wide clear now, with only the faintest traces of cloud remaining. You walk through this poisson terrain, your footsteps softer against the ground, and then something different appears. At first, it is only a shape in the distance. Low. Still, you narrow your gaze as you move closer. It becomes clearer. Figures. Not moving. You slow. The group ahead slows as well. There is no sudden reaction, no sign of alarm, but something has shifted. As you approach, the forms become more defined. They are human, or something very close to it. You stop a short distance away. The group remains still, observing, watching. The figures ahead are fewer in number, 3, perhaps 4. Their posture is similar but not identical. Their movement or lack of it feels different. One turns slightly, noticing your group. There is a pause, a moment that stretches quietly between two small groups standing in the open land. This is rare. Encounters like this were likely uncommon. Evidence suggests that early human populations were spread thinly, and interactions between groups may have been infrequent. When they did occur, the outcomes could vary widely, from peaceful observation to cautious avoidance. You feel the stillness deepen. No one approaches. No one retreats. The distance remains. You look more closely. There are differences. Subtle, but present. The shape of the body, the way they stand, the features of the face, though difficult to see clearly from here. Something about them feels unfamiliar, and yet not entirely. Field discoveries across various regions reveal that early Homo sapiens were not alone on the planet. Other human species such as Neanderthals and Denisovans lived alongside them during certain periods, sharing landscapes and resources. You feel the weight of that realization settle gently. You are not just observing one group, but two, different, yet similar. The group beside you remains calm. They do not step forward. They do not call out. They simply watch. Across the distance, the other group does the same. One of them shifts slightly, taking a step to the side. Another lowers their gaze, then looks up again. The movements are small, careful, measured. You begin to wonder what they see when they look at you. What differences stand out to them? What similarities they recognize? A detail that often goes unnoticed is that genetic evidence suggests there was interaction between these groups. Traces of Neanderthal DNA can still be found in many modern human populations, indicating that encounters were not always distant or brief. You stand there feeling the quiet connection, not through words, but through presence. Two groups, two paths, meeting for a moment in a vast and quiet world. The air feels still. The land holds its breath. Time seems to slow. You notice how no one moves closer. The distance is maintained. It is a space of uncertainty, not fear, but awareness. There is no shared language here, no clear way to communicate intent, only posture, movement, stillness. The picture is still incomplete here. Some interpretations suggest that encounters between different human species may have included cooperation or exchange. Others propose that avoidance was more common, shaped by competition for resources and unfamiliarity. You watch as one individual from the other group turns, slightly shifting their stance. Another follows. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they begin to move away. Not quickly, not abruptly, just enough to increase the distance. Your group remains still for a moment longer, then just as quietly begins to move again, in a different direction. No pursuit, no attempt to follow, only continuation. You walk with them the moment it already beginning to fade into memory. But something has changed. The land feels different now, not because it has altered, but because your understanding of it has. This is not a world occupied by a single story. It is layered, multiple paths, multiple lives, moving alongside each other, sometimes crossing, sometimes not. You continue walking, your thoughts settling slowly. The ground beneath you feels the same. The air moves the same. And yet there is a new awareness. That even in this long stretch of time where so much feels quiet and distant, there are connections, encounters, moments that shape what comes next, even if they leave little trace behind. You look ahead. The group moves steadily unchanged in their rhythm, as if nothing unusual has happened, as if this is simply part of the world they know, and perhaps it is. You follow the rhythm, returning once more. Step, pause, observe. Step again. And as you continue forward, you carry with you the quiet understanding that humanity's story was never singular. It was shared, overlapping, sometimes seen, sometimes not, and often only briefly touched before fading once again into the vastness of time. You continue walking after the quiet encounter, the presence of the other group fading slowly behind you, though it lingers in your thoughts. The land stretches forward once more, unchanged in its gentle rise and fall, yet now carrying a deeper sense of complexity. The air feels warmer again as the day settles into its middle hours. Sunlight rests evenly across the ground, soft but steady, revealing every small detail without harshness. Your steps fall into rhythm once more, guided by the same quiet pattern that has followed you since the beginning. And yet something feels different, not in the movement, but in the awareness that this world holds more than one way of being human. The group continues forward, their pace calm, their spacing familiar. One moves slightly ahead, scanning the land. Another drifts to the side, observing subtle changes in terrain. The pattern remains fluid, responsive, shaped by constant attention. You follow, letting your thoughts settle. The encounter you witnessed was brief, almost quiet enough to be overlooked, but it carries weight, because it suggests something important. That for a long time multiple human species lived alongside one another, sharing the same landscapes while following different paths. Long-standing evidence indicates that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals coexisted in parts of Europe and Western Asia for thousands of years. Their lives overlapped, sometimes in proximity, sometimes at a distance, leaving behind traces that we are still working to understand. You walk in silence, the land unfolding steadily ahead. The ground becomes slightly uneven again, scattered with small stones that shift softly beneath your feet. The vegetation grows sparse in patches, revealing stretches of bare earth that reflect the sunlight in muted tones. After some time, the group begins to slow, not because of danger, not because of opportunity, but because of something less obvious. You notice one individual pause near a patch of ground that appears slightly disturbed. They crouch, examining it closely. Another joins, leaning and studying the same area. You step closer. There are marks here, faint but distinct. Not animal tracks, not quite. The impressions are shaped differently, more narrow, more defined. You recognize them. Footprints, but not from your group. You feel a quiet shift inside you. The presence of the other group is no longer just a memory. It is here, in the ground, in the shape of these impressions. You crouch lower, studying them. The edges are softened, suggesting they are not recent. The rain you passed through earlier has altered them, smoothing their form, filling small gaps. And yet they remain, visible enough to follow. You glance at the group. They are already moving, following the direction of the prints. Not quickly, not with urgency, but with interest. You follow your steps more careful now. Each footprint leads to another, a path, not clearly defined, but present. It curves gently across the land, weaving between small rises and patches of vegetation. You begin to understand something. This is how paths form, not through design, but through repetition, through movement, through presence. Archaeological findings indicate that early human footprints, when preserved, can offer rare insights into movement patterns, group size and behavior. In some cases, entire sequences of footprints have been discovered, revealing moments frozen in time. Something easily missed at first glance is how fragile such evidence is. Most footprints never last long enough to be preserved. They are erased by the weather, by animals, by time itself, leaving only the rarest impressions behind. You follow the trail for a while, your attention focused on the ground. The prints become this clear as you move forward. Some fade completely, others merge into the natural patterns of the land. Eventually they disappear. There is no clear ending, no final mark, just absence. You stand looking ahead. The land stretches outward, offering no immediate clue as to where the other group has gone. They have simply moved on, just as you have. You feel the quiet weight of that realization, that even when two paths cross, even when traces remain, they do not last. They fade. You continue walking with the group, the rhythm returning once again. Step, pause, observe, step again. The land begins to change subtly once more. The ground softens slightly and the air carries a faint shift in scent. Something organic, something alive. You notice small clusters of plants growing closer together, their leaves thicker, their colour deeper. The presence of water nearby seems likely even if it is not yet visible. The group moves with quiet awareness. They have sensed it too. As you walk, your thoughts drift back to the idea of coexistence, of multiple human species sharing the same world, not merging entirely, not separating completely, but existing in a kind of balance that is difficult to fully imagine. The picture is still incomplete here. Some researchers suggest that interactions between these groups included cooperation, exchange, and even shared knowledge. Others believe that competition played a larger role influencing movement patterns and survival. You let the uncertainty remain. There is no need to resolve it. Not here. Not now. The group slows again. Ahead, a small clearing opens, revealing a patch of land that appears recently disturbed. The soil is darker, the surface uneven. One individual steps forward, examining it carefully. You follow. There are signs here, subtle but present. Broken stems, shallow impression, not enough to form a clear picture, but enough to suggest that others have passed through. Recently, you feel the quiet connection again, not direct, not visible, but real. Lives moving through the same space, at different times, leaving behind only fragments. You stand for a moment taking it in, then continue walking. The rhythm returns, the land unfolds, and as you move forward you begin to understand something more deeply. That this long stretch of time, often described as missing or unclear, is not empty at all. It is filled with movement, with encounters, with paths that cross and separate, and with stories that were lived fully. Even if they were never recorded, even if they have mostly faded from view. You move forward again, leaving behind the faint traces of another group, the disturbed soil settling quietly into the past. The land stretches outward in long, gentle waves, each rise and fall blending into the next. The air feels steady, warm, but not overwhelming, carrying only the soft scent of earth and distant plant life. The rhythm returns without effort. Step, pause. Observe. Step again. It feels almost automatic now, as if your body has adjusted to this way of moving, this quiet continuity without clear beginning or end. The group ahead maintains its familiar pattern, spreading just enough to remain aware of the surroundings while staying connected. Their movements are smooth, unhurried, shaped by something deeper than immediate thought. As you walk, the landscape begins to shift once more. Not suddenly, but in a gradual, almost unnoticed way. The ground becomes more varied, alternating between firm patches and softer areas where the soil holds more moisture. Small clusters of vegetation appear more frequently, their leaves broader, their colour slightly richer. You notice how the air carries a different scent now, faint, but present, something organic, something growing. The group seems to recognize it. Their pace adjusts slightly, not faster, but more directed. You follow your awareness sharpening again. After some time, the land opens into a shallow valley. The ground here is darker, the soil softer beneath your feet. A narrow line of green stretches through it, marking the presence of water even before you see it. When you reach it, the source becomes clear, a thin stream winding gently through the valley, its surface catching the light in soft, shifting patterns. You kneel beside it, watching the water move, steady, continuous, uninterrupted. Across many sites, a consistent pattern appears. Early human groups often return to places like this where water plants and animal activity created a reliable center for survival. These locations formed quiet anchors in a world that was otherwise in constant motion. You watch as the group spreads out slightly along the edge of the stream. One begins to gather plant material, selecting carefully. Another scans the area beyond, maintaining that constant awareness. A third kneels near the water, drinking slowly. You notice how nothing is done without attention. Even the simplest actions carry intention. If you pause and look more closely, there is a quieter layer to this place. The ground holds faint impressions older than the ones you followed earlier. Not clear enough to trace, but present enough to suggest that this valley has been visited before. Not once, but many times. You step lightly, careful not to disturb what little remains. And then something catches your eye. Near the edge of the stream, partially embedded in the soil, lies a small object. You move closer. It is a fragment of stone, shaped, not recently, but intentionally. You pick it up. It fits easily in your hand, its edge is worn but still defined. One side is smooth, the other slightly jagged, as if it had been broken from a larger piece long ago. You turn it slowly, feeling its weight. This is not from your group. It has been here, left behind, forgotten. Evidence gathered over time points toward the reuse of certain locations by different groups across long stretches of time. Objects like this left behind and later rediscovered suggest that these places held recurring importance. You set it back down gently, not taking it, not moving it, letting it remain where it has rested. The group continues their quiet activity. You watch as one individual kneels beside a cluster of plants, carefully pulling them from the ground. The roots come free with a soft resistance, bringing with them dark soil that clings briefly before falling away. Another stands nearby, watching the surrounding area. Always aware, always ready. You begin to notice something about the way they move here. It is different from before, less exploratory, more familiar, as if this place is known. Known, not in a permanent sense, but in a repeated one. The full picture remains difficult to pin down, but some lines of thought suggest that early humans may have developed a kind of spatial memory, returning to locations that provided reliable resources. Others caution that what appears as repeated use could simply reflect favorable conditions that drew different groups independently. You let the thoughts settle. There is no need to resolve it. The place itself feels enough. You sit near the stream, listening to the steady flow of water. The sound fills the space, gently masking smaller noises, creating a kind of calm that feels almost intentional. The light shifts slightly as the sun moves higher, reflecting off the surface in soft patterns that drift and change. You dip your hand into the water again. Cold, clear. It carries a quiet consistency that feels grounding. You bring your hand back, watching the droplets fall, disappearing into the soil. Nothing here remained for long, and yet places like this endure. Not unchanged, but persistent. The group begins to gather again. The small tasks are complete. The moment of pause is ending. You stand brushing the soil lightly from your hands. The movement resumes. Step, pause, observe. Step again. As you leave the valley behind, you look back once more. The stream continues to flow. The ground holds its faint impressions. The small stone remains where you left it. It will stay there for a while, until time shifts it again, until something else passes through. You turn forward. The land stretches out once more. And as you continue walking, you begin to feel a deeper understanding settle within you. That even in this long stretch of time where so much seems lost, there are places that hold memory. Not clearly, not completely, but enough to remind you that the story has always been there, waiting, just beneath the surface. You leave the quiet valley behind the steady sound of water fading into the distance as the land opens once more. The air feels slightly warmer again, touched by the steady presence of sunlight that now rests gently across the ground. Your steps return to their familiar rhythm, each movement settling into a calm, unbroken flow. The group continues ahead, their spacing relaxed, their movement smooth. There is no sign of urgency, only a steady continuation that feels almost endless. And yet something begins to shift. Not in the land, but in the feeling of it. You notice it slowly. A subtle difference in how the group moves. A slight change in how they observe. As if something beneath the surface of their actions is becoming more defined. You follow, letting your awareness expand. The ground beneath you becomes firmer again, scattered with small stones that press gently underfoot. The vegetation thins slightly, leaving open stretches of earth that reflect the light in muted tones. After some time, the group slows. This time the reason is not immediately clear. There is no water, no animal, no obvious resource, and yet they stop. You stop with them. They gather loosely in a small area, not tightly clustered, but closer than before. One sits, another remains standing. A third moves slightly to the side, then returns. There is a pause. A longer one than usual. You feel it, a kind of stillness that is different from rest, more focused, more inward. You watch as one individual picks up a small object from the ground, not a tool, not something immediately useful, just a stone. They turn it slowly in their hand, examining it from different angles. Then, without any clear purpose, they place it down again, next to another stone. You notice this, 2 stones, close together. You look around. There are others, not scattered randomly, but loosely grouped. You move closer. The arrangement is simple. No clear pattern, no defined shape, but not entirely random either. It holds a kind of quiet intention. What emerges from long-term study is that early signs of symbolic behavior did not appear all at once. Instead, they may have developed gradually through small repeated actions that did not yet form clear or lasting meaning. You sit near the stones observing. Another individual approaches and adds a third stone to the small grouping. They do not adjust the others. They do not refine the arrangement. They simply place it and step back. You begin to wonder. Is this meaningful, or is it simply movement? A moment of pause expressed through action. There is a quieter layer to this. Something that does not demand interpretation, but invites it. You look at the group. They are not focused on the stones, not in a sustained way. They move, sit, stand, shift their attention elsewhere, and yet the stones remain, placed, chosen, left as they are. There is still no clear consensus on this. Some interpretations suggest that simple arrangements like these could represent early forms of symbolic thinking. Others suggest they may have no deeper meaning at all, emerging from behavior that does not translate into intention as we understand it. You let the question rest. There is no need to decide. The moment itself feels enough. After a while, the group begins to move again. No one returns to the stones. No one changes them. They are left behind. You follow the image, lingering quietly in your thoughts. The land continues, unchanged, and yet you carry something new. A sense that behavior is not only about survival, but also about expression. Even if that expression is subtle, even if it leaves no lasting trace. As you walk, your attention begins to shift again, not outward, but inward. You begin to notice the way thoughts seem to form more clearly, not just reactions to what you see, but reflections, question, connection. You wonder if something similar is happening within the group, if their awareness is changing, if their way of experiencing the world is becoming more layered, more complex. Evidence gathered over time points toward a gradual development of cognitive abilities during this long period. Changes in tool-making, social behavior, and environmental adaptation suggest that something within human thinking was evolving, even if the exact nature of that change remains difficult to define. You walk in silence, the idea settling gently. The ground beneath you feels steady. The air moves softly around you. Everything continues as it has, and yet something beneath it all feels different. More connected, more aware. After some time, the group slows again. This time they do not stop completely. They move more slowly, scanning the area with increased attention. You follow their gaze. At first, nothing stands out. Then gradually you begin to notice small changes, broken branches, slight disturbances in the ground. Not fresh, but present. You feel the familiar awareness return. Others have been here, not recently, but enough to leave a trace. You stand quietly taking it in. This land is not empty. It never was. It's filled with movement, with presence, with moments that overlap and fade. You continue walking the rhythm, returning once more. Step, pause, observe. Step again, and as you move forward, you begin to feel something settle more deeply within you. That the missing parts of this long stretch of time are not defined by absence, but by subtlety, by moments that are too quiet to leave clear marks, by actions that do not yet form lasting patterns, by thoughts that begin but do not fully reveal themselves. You walk on the land stretching endlessly ahead, and somewhere within that quiet continuity something is slowly becoming. Not all at once, not clearly, but steadily, like a thought forming in the dark. You move on from the quiet cluster of stones, the image lingering gently in your thoughts as the land opens once more. The ground feels steady beneath your feet, the rhythm of walking returning, with a calm familiarity that no longer requires effort. The group continues forward, their spacing relaxed, their movement smooth and unbroken. There is no sign that anything unusual has happened, no indication that the small moment you witnessed had carried any particular weight, and yet you carry it with you. A subtle shift, a quiet suggestion that something deeper is forming. The land stretches ahead in long, gentle slopes, the surface alternating between firm earth and scattered stone. The air feels balanced, neither too warm nor too cool, carrying only the faint scent of dry vegetation. You walk in silence, your thoughts drifting, not in a distracted way, but in a slow, steady unfolding. You begin to notice how your awareness has changed. Earlier, your attention was focused outward, on the land, on the group, on the immediate details of survival. Now there is something else, a layer of reflection. You begin to wonder if the same shift is happening within the group, if their experience of the world is beginning to include more than what is directly in front of them, if thoughts are beginning to extend, to extend beyond the present moment. After some time, the group slows again. This time, the reason is not immediately clear. There is no visible resource, no obvious change out. And yet they gather. Closer than before, you step in with them, sensing that something different is about to unfold. One individual sits, another joins, a third remains standing watching. There is a pause, longer than usual, not rest, not preparation, something else. You watch closely. The sitting individuals begin to make small sounds, soft, rhythmic, not random, but not structured either. A pattern begins to emerge. A repeated tone, a variation, a response. You listen, trying to understand. The sounds do not form words, not in any recognizable way, but they carry something, a sense of connection, a shared moment. Evidence gathered over time points toward the gradual development of vocal communication during this period. Early humans likely used a combination of sounds, gestures, and expressions to convey meaning, though the exact structure of these systems remains difficult to reconstruct. You notice how the others respond, not with confusion, not with indifference, but with attention. They listen. They shift slightly. One repeats a similar sound. Another adds a variation. The pattern grows. You feel it. A kind of cohesive, not unlike the rhythm of walking or the rhythm of the fire, but different, more intentional. A finer detail begins to take shape here. Vocalizations like these may have served not only practical purposes, but also social ones, helping to strengthen bonds within the group even before complex language fully developed. You sit quietly, letting the sounds settle around you. They are soft, almost blending into the environment, and yet they hold your attention completely. You begin to wonder what they mean. Are they signals, expressions, something closer to emotion? The full picture remains difficult to pin down. Some interpretations suggest that early vocal patterns may have been closely tied to immediate needs, while others propose that they could have carried more abstract meaning even at this early stage. You let the question remain. There is no need to resolve it. The moment itself feels enough. After some time, the sounds fade, not abruptly, but gradually. The individuals fall silent. The group shifts again. The pause ends. Movement resumes. You stand and follow the rhythm, returning once more. Step. Pause. Observe. Step again. The land stretches outward unchanged, and yet something within you feels different. You carry the sound with you, that quiet pattern, that shared moment. You begin to notice how it lingers, not just in memory, but in feeling, as if it has settled somewhere deeper. You continue walking, your awareness now more attuned to subtle changes. The ground beneath your feet, the movement of air, the sounds that rise and fall around you. Everything feels connected. As you move, the landscape begins to shift once more. The ground rises slightly, forming a low ridge that offers a wider view of the land ahead. You follow the group upward, each step bringing you to a higher vantage point. When you reach the top, you pause. The view stretches far. The land below spreads out in soft patterns of light and shadow. You take it in slowly, and then something catches your attention. Movement, far in the distance. Not close enough to see clearly, but present. You narrow your gaze, trying to understand. It could be animals. It could be another group. It's too far to know. And that uncertainty feels familiar now. You stand there for a moment, watching. Then the group begins to descend, not toward the movement, but along a different path. You follow. The rhythm returns. The moment fades, and yet the sense of something forming continues to grow. Not clearly, not completely, but steadily, as if the world itself is beginning to hold more meaning, more connection, more possibility. You walk on the land stretching endlessly ahead, and somewhere within this quiet continuity, something new is beginning to take shape. Not suddenly, not dramatic, but slowly, like a voice learning to be hers. You descend from the ridge, the distant movement fading from view as the land closes in slightly around you. The air feels heavier here, not unpleasant, but carrying a faint density that settles quietly with each breath. The ground beneath your feet is firm, though scattered with loose stones that shift softly as you step. The group continues forward, their pace unchanged, their movement steady and unbroken. There is no sign that the distant shapes you saw moments ago have altered their path, and yet something lingers, a sense that the world around you holds more than what is immediately visible. You walk in silence, your thoughts moving slowly, matching the rhythm of your steps. Step, pause, observe, step again. The land begins to shift once more, subtly at first, then more clearly. The ground darkens slightly, the soil richer, more compact. The vegetation changes, becoming denser in places with thicker stems and broader leaves. The air carries a faint scent of moisture again, though no water is yet visible. You notice how the group responds, their attention sharpens. Their spacing adjusts slightly, drawing a bit closer, though still maintaining that quiet balance. Something here requires more awareness. You follow your senses, becoming more attuned. After some time, the reason begins to reveal itself. The land ahead shows signs of disruption. Not fresh, but not entirely faded either. A patch of ground appears uneven, as if something has passed through with force. Broken stars lie scattered, their edges dry but still distinct. The soil is disturbed, pressed down in irregular patterns. You slow, stepping carefully. The group gathers near the edge of this area, observing. You move closer. The signs are clearer here. Large impressions, deep, overlapping, not from humans, from something much larger. You feel a quiet shift in your awareness. This is not just movement. It is disruption, a sign that something powerful has passed through. What becomes clear from accumulated evidence is that large animals, especially during this period, could dramatically alter their surroundings. Herd movements, territorial behavior, or sudden changes in direction could reshape the land in ways that affected everything nearby. You step lightly across the disturbed ground, feeling how uneven it is beneath your feet. It would not have been easy to move through this area. And yet the group continues, carefully, deliberately. You begin to notice something else. There are no signs of other human presence here, no footprints, no tools, nothing to suggest that anyone else has passed through since this disruption occurred. A subtle layer begins to emerge. This place feels avoided, not empty by chance. But left alone, you glance at the group. They do not linger. They do not explore deeply. They move through with awareness, with caution. You follow, sensing the quiet tension that has entered the rhythm. Not fear, but respect. Respect for something unseen, something that has already passed and could return. Across different excavation sites, similar patterns appear. Areas heavily affected by a large animal activity often show fewer signs of human presence, suggesting that early humans may have avoided certain locations when they posed too much risk. You continue walking the ground, gradually becoming more stable again as you move beyond the disturbed area. The vegetation returns, the air lightens slightly, the tension eases, but it does not disappear completely. It lingers as a reminder. You walk for some time, the rhythm slowly settling back into its familiar pace. Step, pause, observe. Step again. The land opens once more, revealing a broader stretch ahead. The sky above is clear again, the light steady and even. Everything feels calm, and yet something within you has shifted. You begin to understand more clearly how fragile this balance is, how quickly conditions can change, how easily a place can become unsafe or abandoned. You think about the long stretch of time you're moving through, about the gaps, the missing pieces, and you begin to see them differently. Not as emptiness, but as movement, as change, as places that were once used and then left behind. There is a subtle realization here that absence does not always mean nothing happened. Sometimes it means something happened that made it impossible to stay. The evidence allows for more than one explanation. Some perspectives suggest that environmental changes or the movement of large animals could have displaced human groups from certain regions. Others propose that these patterns may reflect natural variation in where evidence has been preserved. You let the thoughts settle. There is no need to resolve it. The land continues, the group continues, and you continue with them. After a while, the group slows again. This time the reason is quieter, less obvious. You notice one individual pause, looking down at the ground. You step closer. There is nothing dramatic. Nope, click a sign. Just a small detail. A cluster of plants that appears slightly different from the others. Healthier, more vibrant. You watch as the individual kneels, examining it carefully. They touch the leaves, the soil, then gently begin to gather. You begin to understand. Even in places shaped by disruption, life returns. Slowly, quietly. And early humans would have recognized these small signs, these subtle shifts. Something that does not immediately stand out is how closely early humans likely observed patterns of regrowth and recovery in the land. These changes could indicate safety, availability of resources, or the passing of danger. You sit for a moment watching the careful gathering. The movement is slow, intentional, unhurried, as if there is time, even in a world where survival depends on constant awareness. After some time, the group rises again. The moment passes, the rhythm returns. Step, pause, observe. Step again, and as you continue forward, you carry with you a deeper understanding that this long, quiet stretch of time was shaped not only by presence, but by absence, by places left behind, by paths not taken, by decisions made quietly, and often without leaving a trace. You walk on the land, stretching endlessly ahead, and somewhere within it the story continues. Not clearly, not completely, but always moving, always unfolding. You move beyond the disturbed ground, the uneven impressions softening behind you, as the land settles once more into a quieter rhythm. The air feels lighter again, carrying a faint warmth that rests gently on your skin. Each step feels steady, grounded, as if the landscape itself has returned to balance. The group continues forward, their movements relax once more. The subtle tension that lingered earlier has eased, replaced by a calm awareness that flows naturally through each action. You follow, letting your breathing match the pace. Step, pause, observe. Step again. The land begins to change in a quieter way now, not through disruption, but through subtle richness. The soil grows darker in patches, the vegetation slightly more varied. Small clusters of plants appear with different shapes, different textures, each occupying its own space without crowding the others. You notice how the group responds. Their attention shifts downward, more often scanning the ground, not for tracks or signs of danger, but for smaller details. Possibilities. You slow as well, adjusting your focus. At first, it is difficult to see. The differences are slight. A variation in leaf shape, a change in colour, The way one plant grows closer to the ground while another rises slightly higher. But slowly these details begin to stand out. The group spreads out just a little, each individual moving through the area with quiet purpose. One kneels examining a cluster of plants. Another moves a few steps further, pausing, then continuing. You move closer to one of them. They reach down and gently pull a small plant from the ground, its roots coming free with a soft resistance. The soil clings briefly, then falls away in small pieces. You look at it more closely. It does not appear remarkable. Not at first, but the way it is handled suggests otherwise. Over time, a consistent picture begins to emerge. Early human diets were not limited to large visible sources like animals. A wide variety of plant materials formed an essential part of daily nutrition, often requiring careful selection and preparation. You watch as the individual examines the plant briefly, then sets it aside in a small collection. Another plant is left untouched. Then another is taken. The choices are precise, not random. You begin to understand how much knowledge is carried here. Not spoken, not written, but known. There is a subtle layer here that is easy to miss. Many edible plants resemble others that are not suitable for consumption, and distinguishing between them would have required careful observation and shared experience over long periods. You glance around. The group moves quietly through the space, each person following their own path while remaining connected to the others. There is no overlap, no competition, only a shared understanding of how to move within the environment. You kneel and look more closely at the ground. Now you begin to see it. The variation, the pattern. What once appeared uniform now reveals complexity. You notice small marks on some leaves, tiny holes, signs of insects. Other leaves are untouched, healthier, more vibrant. You reach out, brushing your fingers lightly against one of them. The texture is smooth, cool. It carries a faint scent, subtle but distinct. You begin to realize that this world is filled with layers of information. Not obvious, not immediate, but present for those who know how to see. The group continues, gathering their movements slow and deliberate. Time feels different here. Not measured, not divided, just passing. You might think of how quickly things move in the modern world, how little time is spent observing such small details. Here observation is everything. Without it, survival becomes uncertain. After some time, the group begins to gather again. The moment of collection is ending. You stand brushing the soil gently from your hands. The rhythm returns. Step, pause, observe, step again. As you move on, you carry with you a new awareness. Not of large events, not of dramatic changes, but of quiet complexity, of the small decisions that shape each moment. The land stretches ahead, open once more. The sky above is clear, the light soft and even. Everything feels calm, and yet something within you has shifted. You begin to understand that life here is not defined by single events, but by accumulation, by repetition, by countless small actions that build upon one another over time. The evidence allows for more than one explanation when it comes to how early humans developed such detailed environmental knowledge. Some suggest it emerged gradually through experience and observation, while others propose that certain insights may have been shared more directly within groups. You let the thoughts settle. There is no need to choose. The land continues. The group continues, and you continue with them. After a while, the group slows again. This time, they do not stop completely. They move more slowly, their attention shifting outward once more. You follow their gaze. The landscape ahead begins to change. The ground becomes slightly more open, the vegetation thinning just enough to reveal wider patches of earth. The air feels still, quiet. You take a slow breath, and for a moment everything feels suspended, balanced, as if the world itself is holding still. Then gradually movement returns, a small shift, a subtle sound, life continuing. You step forward again. The rhythm resumes. Step, pause, observe, step again. And as you walk, you begin to feel something settle more deeply within you. That even in this long stretch of time where so much seems quiet and distant, there is a richness that does not depend on what is large or visible. It exists in the small, in the unnoticed, in the moments that pass without record. You walk on the land, unfolding endlessly ahead, and somewhere within that quiet continuity, something continues to grow, not in sudden leaps, but in slow, steady layers, like roots beneath the surface. You continue forward, the quiet act of gathering now behind you, though. The awareness it brought lingers gently in your mind. The land stretches out again in long, open lines, the ground firm beneath your feet, the air calm and steady. There is a softness to the light now. Not dim, not bright, just even. You walk with the group, your steps falling into the familiar rhythm once more. Step, pause, observe, step again. The landscape begins to change in a way that feels different from before. Not through variation in plants or soil, but through a kind of stillness. The ground ahead appears undisturbed, too undisturbed. You notice it gradually, a patch of earth that looks smoother than the surrounding land. The vegetation here is sparse, almost as if something has prevented it from growing fully. The group slows. Their movement becomes more careful, more focused. You follow, your attention narrowing. As you approach, you begin to see it. A shallow depression in the ground. Not large, not deep, but distinct. You stop at the edge. The soil here is darker, slightly more compact. Small stones have been placed around the edges, not in a perfect circle, but enough to suggest intention. You feel the shift immediately. This is not a place of movement. This is a place of pause. You step closer, kneeling slightly. There is nothing visible within the depression. No object, no remains. And yet the space feels different, held, defined. You glance at the group. They have gathered around, not tightly, but with a quiet awareness. Their movements slow even further, their presence more contained. No one speaks, no one gestures. They simply stand, or sit, or remain still. What we know from excavations suggests that early forms of burial or body placement may have begun during this long stretch of time, though the evidence is limited and often difficult to interpret. Some sites show clear indications of intentional placement, while others remain ambiguous. You look again at the shallow depression, trying to understand, was something placed here? Was it removed? Or has it simply faded beyond recognition? A finer detail begins to take shape as you observe the arrangement of stones. They are not random. Their placement suggests care even if the exact purpose is no longer clear. You sit quietly at the edge. The group remains still. The moment stretches, longer than usual. You begin to notice how different this pause feels. It is not rest. It is not observation. It is something else. Something inward. You feel it as a kind of stillness that carries weight. Not heavy, but present. You look at the faces around you. Calm, focused, quiet. You begin to wonder what this place means to them. Is it memory? Recognition? Something more abstract? There is still no single agreement on this. Some interpretations suggest that early burial practices may reflect the beginnings of symbolic thought, perhaps even early beliefs about life and death. Others propose that such arrangements could have practical explanations such as protecting remains from scavengers. You let the question remain. There is no clear answer. Only the space itself. You lower your gaze again to the ground. The soil, the stones, the absence within the centre. You notice how the edges of the depression are slightly raised as if the earth was moved deliberately. Then gently over time it settled again, almost returning to what it was. Almost, but not entirely. Something that does not immediately stand out is how subtle early burial sites can be. Without clear markers, many may have gone unnoticed, blending back into the landscape over time. You sit there letting the quiet settle around you. The air feels still. The sounds of the land seem distant. Even the movement of the group feels softened, as if this place changes how everything is experienced. After a while, one individual rises. Slowly, another wall follows. The group begins to move again. No one disturbs the stones. No one alters the space. It is left as it is. You stand taking one last look, then step away. The rhythm returns. Step, pause, observe, step again. But something has changed. You carry the stillness with you. The sense of a moment that was not about survival, not about movement, but about meaning, even if that meaning remains unclear. As you walk, your thoughts drift, not in a restless way, but in a quiet unfolding. You begin to consider how moments like this might have shaped the development of human awareness, how the recognition of absence, of loss, of something no longer present, could lead to new forms of thought, new question, new understandings. The land continues ahead, open and unranged, and yet within you something feels different, more reflective, more aware. You look at the group again. They move as they always have, calm, steady, unhurried, as if nothing unusual has happened, and perhaps for them it has not. Perhaps this is simply part of their world. You follow the rhythm steady, the land stretching endlessly ahead. And as you continue walking, you begin to feel that this long stretch of time is not only about survival, it is also about the quiet emergence of something deeper, something that does not leave clear traces, but shapes everything that comes after. You walk on from the quiet hollow of disturbed earth, the stillness of that place settling behind you like a soft echo. The land opens again, stretching outward in long, gentle lines, the ground firm and even beneath your feet. The air feels calm, carrying only the faint warmth of the day and the distant scent of dry grass. The rhythm returns familiar and steady. Step, pause, observe, step again. The group moves as they always have, their spacing relaxed, their awareness constant but unforced. Nothing in their movement suggests urgency. Nothing suggests that the moment you pass through held anything unusual, and yet you carry it. That quiet sense of meaning, that pause that felt different from all the others. As you walk, your thoughts begin to gather around it, not in a rushed way, but slowly, carefully. You begin to wonder how many such places exist, how many moments like that have happened across the vast stretch of time, and how many have faded without leaving more than the faintest trace. The land ahead remains open, but your attention has shifted inward now. You are no longer only observing. You are considering, reflecting. You begin to think about how this long stretch of time is understood today, how people far in the future try to piece together what happened here. Over many excavations, a similar picture has come into view. There are long periods where the evidence becomes sparse, where tools change very little, where signs of new behavior appear only rarely. These stretches are often described as slow or even stagnant, though that description may not fully capture what was truly happening. You walk in silence, letting that idea settle. What does it mean for time to feel still, for change to be so gradual that it is almost invisible? You look at the group. They are not still. They are moving, adapting, living. Every moment is filled with decisions, actions, awareness. Nothing about this feels stagnant, and yet from a distance, from far in the future, it might appear that way. A quieter nuance begins to surface here. The absence of visible change in tools or markings does not necessarily mean that nothing was evolving. It may simply reflect how little of that change was preserved. You let your gaze drift across the land. It looks the same as before, open, calm, unchanging. But you know now that this is only part of the story. You continue walking, your thoughts deepening. After some time, the group slows again. This time, the reason is not tied to the land itself. There is no visible feature drawing them in. Instead, they gather loosely, their movement becoming more contained. You step in with them. The air feels still. The moment feels different. Not like rest, not like observation, but something closer to shared attention. You watch as one individual begins to move their hands in a slow, deliberate way. Not shaping a tool, not gathering, just moving, a gesture. Then another responds, mirroring, or perhaps answering. The movement continues, subtle, measured. You feel the quiet connection want to form in again, similar to the sounds you heard before, but different. More visual, more contained. Research built up over time suggests that early forms of communication likely involved a combination of gesture and sound with meaning carried through repetition and shared context rather than fixed structure. You watch the movements carefully, trying to understand. The gestures do not point to anything specific. They do not direct action. They seem to exist within the moment itself. You begin to wonder if this is a way of sharing something beyond immediate need, something less practical, more expressive. There is no fully settled explanation for this. Some interpretations suggest that such gestures may represent early forms of symbolic behavior, while others propose that they remain tied to immediate social interaction without deeper abstraction. You let the uncertainty remain. The moment does not demand clarity. It simply unfolds. After a while, the gestures fade. The group shifts. The pause ends. Movement resumes. You stand and follow the rhythm, returning once more. Step. Pause. Observe. Step again. The land stretches ahead unchanged, and yet your understanding continues to shift. You begin to see this long stretch of time differently. Not as a gap, not as something missing, but as something was subtle, something that does not reveal itself easily. You think about how people in the future try to explain it, to define it, to place it within clear boundaries. But here within it, those boundaries do not exist. only continuity, only gradual change. You walk for some time, the landscape unfolding in quiet repetition. Then slowly something begins to emerge again, not in the land, but in your thought, the idea of explanation, of trying to understand what cannot be fully seen. Different interpretations continue to sit side by side when it comes to this period. Some suggest that environmental stability led to slower visible change. Others propose that population-sized social structure or even chance may have played a role in shaping how this time appears in the record. You consider each possibility, letting them settle without needing to choose. The group continues forward, unchanged, unconcerned with these questions. And perhaps that is the clearest understanding of all, that this time was not lived as a mystery. It was lived as life, simple, complex, continuous. You walk on the rhythm steady, the land stretching endlessly ahead, and as you continue you begin to feel a quiet acceptance settle within you, that not everything can be fully explained, that some parts of the story will always remain just beyond reach, not lost, but softly hidden, within the slow, steady flow of time. You continue walking, the quiet gestures of the group fading gently behind you, though their meaning lingers in a way that feels difficult to name. The land stretches outward once more, calm and open, the ground firm beneath your feet. The air feels steady, carrying a faint warmth that settles evenly across your skin. The rhythm returns again. Step, pause, observe, step again. It feels familiar now, almost like a constant thread running through everything you experience. The group ahead moves with the same quiet consistency, their awareness spread gently across the landscape. And yet something begins to shift again, not in the land, but in how you think about it. You begin to consider what lies beneath all of this, not the visible surface, but something deeper, hidden, carried forward in ways that are not immediately seen. The group slows slightly, though they do not stop. Their movement becomes more deliberate, their attention turning downward, not just to the ground, but to small details that are easy to miss. You follow their gaze. At first nothing stands out. Then slowly you begin to notice tiny fragments scattered across the ground. You kneel to look more closely. They are small, almost insignificant pieces of stone, fragments of bone, worn, broken. You pick one up. It is light, smooth in some places, rough in others. It does not seem useful. Not anymore. But it was. Once. Across many sites, a consistent picture begins to emerge. Early human landscapes were often filled with small remnants like these traces of activity that, over time, became scattered and fragmented, making them difficult to interpret as part of a larger whole. You turn the fragment in your hand. It tells you very little on its own, but you begin to understand that it is part of something larger, something that cannot be seen all at once. You set it back down carefully. The group continues forward. You rise and follow. As you walk, your thoughts drift further into this idea of what remains and what does not. You begin to consider how much of human history exists in forms that are not visible at all. Not in tools, not in marks, but in something carried within, passed from one generation to another, without leaving a clear trace. There is a quieter nuance here that begins to take shape. Knowledge habits, ways of moving and understanding the world may have been transmitted through observation and imitation, leaving no direct evidence behind. You look at the group again, at the way they move, the way they respond, the way they seem to know what to do without explanation. This is knowledge, but it's not recorded, it is lived. You continue walking, letting the idea settle. After some time, the group slows again. This time they gather near a patch of ground that appears unremarkable at first glance. You step closer. There is nothing obvious, no clear sign, and yet they remain, observing. You kneel, looking more carefully. The soil here is slightly different, finer, more compact. You run your fingers lightly across the surface. It feels smoother, as if it has been disturbed and settled again many times. You begin to understand this place has been used, not once, but repeatedly, over time. Evidence gathered over time points toward the repeated use of certain locations by early humans even when no permanent structures were built. These places may have held practical importance or simply been remembered as part of broader movement through the land. You sit back slightly, letting the realization settle. This is not a place marked by clear lines, but by subtle ones, the kind that only become visible through careful attention. You watch as one individual kneels and begins to move the soil gently, not digging deeply, just shifting the surface, then stopping. The action is brief, almost casual, and yet it carries intention. You begin to wonder what they are sensing, what they are remembering. The full picture remains difficult to pin down. Some interpretations suggest that early humans may have had a sense of place that extended beyond immediate need, returning to locations based on memory or familiarity. Others believe that repeated use may have been guided purely by environmental factors. You let the thought remain open. The group rises again. The moment passes. Movement resumes. You stand and follow. Step, pause, observe. Step again. As you move forward, the land begins to feel different. Not physically, but in your awareness of it. You begin to see it as layered, not just a surface, but a collection of moments, each one leaving behind something small, something incomplete, something that over time becomes part of a larger pattern. You walk for a while, the rhythm steady, then slowly you begin to notice something else, the way the group responds to one another, not just in action, but in timing, in coordination, in subtle adjustments that seem almost instinctive. There is no need for instruction, no visible planning, and yet everything flows. You begin to consider what allows this. What makes it possible? There is a subtle layer here that is easy to miss. Genetic inheritance may have played a role in shaping certain behaviors, influencing how individuals respond to their environment and to each other in ways that are not consciously learned. You look at the group again, at the quiet coordination, the shared rhythm, and you begin to realize that some parts of this story may be carried not just through experience, but through something deeper, something embedded, something that moves forward even when everything else fades. You continue walking the land, stretching endlessly ahead. And as you do, you begin to feel the quiet weight of what cannot be seen, what cannot be touched, but is always present, carried forward, across time, through countless lives, leaving behind only the faintest hints of its existence. You continue forward, the faint fragments left behind on the ground slowly fading from view as the land stretches out again in calm, unbroken lines. The air feels steady, touched by a gentle warmth that rests evenly across your skin. Each step returns to its familiar rhythm, quiet and unhurried. Step, pause, observe. Step again. The group moves as it always has, their spacing relaxed, their awareness spread gently across the landscape. Nothing in their movement suggests change, and yet something beneath the surface begins to shift again, not in what you see, but in what you begin to understand. The land ahead appears open, but there is a subtle difference in its feeling. The space feels larger now, not physically wider, but quieter in a way that carries a faint sense of distance. You notice it slowly, the absence of signs, fewer fragments, fewer disturbances, fewer indications that others have passed through. You continue walking, your attention stretching outward, searching for something to confirm or deny the feeling. But the land remains still, and in that stillness a question begins to take shape. How many are here? You glance at the group, small, only a handful of individuals. You look out across the horizon, endless and empty. The contrast settles gently into your thoughts. What becomes clear from accumulated evidence is that at certain points in early human history, populations may have been extremely small. Some studies suggest that groups were scattered across vast regions separated by distances that made regular contact unlikely. You walk in silence, letting the idea settle. The world feels larger now. Not because it has changed, but because you see it differently. The group continues forward, their movements steady, their awareness unchanged. They do not seem to notice the absence. Or perhaps for them it's not absence at all. It is simply the way the world is. You follow your steps quieter now, your thoughts slower. After some time the group slows again. This time there is no visible reason, no resource, no sign. They simply pause. You stop with them. They stand looking out across the land, waiting, listening. You try to understand what they are sensing. But there is nothing obvious, only stillness, only space. You feel the quiet weight of it, the distance, the separation. You begin to consider how fragile this existence must be, how easily a group like this could disappear. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but gradually, through loss, through change, through time. There is a quieter nuance here that begins to take shape. Some researchers have proposed that early human populations may have experienced periods of significant reduction, where numbers dropped so low that survival itself became uncertain. You feel the depth of that idea, not as a dramatic event, but as a slow thinning, a gradual fading. You look at the group again, at the small number of individuals, at the quiet way they move, and you begin to sense how delicate this balance is. Every decision matters, every moment carries weight, not in a visible way, but in a cumulative one. You continue walking, the rhythm returning once more. Step, pause, observe. Step again. The land remains open, the sky wide, the air still, and yet something within you has shifted. You begin to see the gaps differently, not as missing pieces, but as places where something nearly disappeared. There is no fully settled explanation for this. Some interpretations suggest that environmental pressures such as climate shifts or resource scarcity may have reduced human populations. Others point to the possibility of disease competition or simply chance playing a role. You let the uncertainty remain. The land does not offer answers, only presence. You walk for a while, the stillness stretching on. Then slowly something begins to change. Not in the land, but in the group. Their spacing adjusts slightly. They move a little closer together, not tightly, but enough to feel different. You notice it, a subtle shift toward proximity, toward connection, as if the openness of the land has drawn them inward. You feel it too, a quiet sense of closeness, of shared presence, in a world that feels vast and empty. This becomes important, not as a conscious choice, but as something instinctive, a way of maintaining continuity, a way of ensuring that the group remains whole. Over time, a consistent understanding has gradually taken shape that social bonds played a critical role in early human survival. Cooperation, connection, and shared awareness allowed small groups to persist even in challenging conditions. You walk with them, feeling the subtle closeness, the quiet coordination, the shared rhythm. It is not spoken, not defined, but it is there. You continue forward, the land unfolding slowly, the rhythm steady, the awareness deepening. And as you move, you begin to feel the quiet significance of this moment. That within the vast stretch of time where so much appears to fade, there are points where survival itself becomes uncertain, where the story could have ended, but did not. You walk on the horizon, stretching endlessly ahead, and somewhere within that quiet continuity you begin to understand that the missing years are not empty. They are fragile, balanced on the edge of continuation, carried forward by small groups like this, moving quietly through a world that does not always make room for them. You continue forward, the quiet sense of fragility still resting in your thoughts as the land stretches out in long, steady lines. The air feels calm, almost still, carrying only the faint warmth of the day. Your steps return to their familiar rhythm, grounding you once more in the present. Step, pause, observe, step again. The group moves together more closely now, not tightly, but with a subtle shift that feels intentional in its own quiet way. Their awareness seems more inward, their attention shared across the space between them rather than spread outward across the land. You follow, feeling that same closeness, not forced, but natural, as if the vastness around you has gently drawn everything inward. The land ahead begins to change again, though this time the shift is broader, more gradual. The ground rises slightly, then levels, then dips again, forming a pattern that feels almost familiar. You begin to notice something. The direction of movement. The way the group continues forward without hesitation, as if following something not immediately visible. A broad range of findings now point toward a pattern in early human movement, often described as long-distance migration. Over many generations, groups gradually moved across large regions following resources, climate patterns, and opportunities for survival. You walk with them, feeling the steady continuation of that movement. Not a journey with a clear beginning or end, but something ongoing, unfolding across time. You look ahead. The horizon stretches wide, offering no clear destination, and yet the group continues, as if they are part of something larger than any single moment. If you slow down your attention, something delicate emerges here. Movement like this is not only about survival in the immediate sense. It is also about continuity, about carrying knowledge, habits, and ways of being across distances, that cannot be measured in a single lifetime. You let that thought settle. This is not just walking, it is passage through space, through time. After a while, the group slows again. This time they gather near a slight rise in the land where the ground offers a wider view of the area ahead. You step up with them, your gaze extending outward. The landscape shifts again. Different, not dramatically, but enough to notice. The vegetation changes. The texture of the land feels unfamiliar. Subtle differences that suggest you're entering a new region. You stand quietly taking it in. The air carries a slightly different scent. The light reflects differently off the ground. Even the silence feels altered. When researchers compare sites across distant regions, a similar trend appears. As early humans moved into new environments, they adapted to different conditions, developing variations in tools, behavior, and survival strategies. You begin to understand how this movement shapes everything. Not just where people are, but how they live, how they think, how they respond to the world around them. You look at the group again. Their movements remain calm, confident, as if change is expected, as if adaptation is simply part of life. There is a faint detail here that is easy to pass by. Even small changes in environment such as soil type or plant distribution could influence the way early humans lived, often in ways that are difficult to detect in the archaeological record. You follow as the group begins to descend the rise, moving into this new stretch of land. The rhythm continues. Step, pause, observe, step again. The ground beneath your feet feels slightly different, more compact, less forgiving. The vegetation grows in new patterns with unfamiliar spacing and variation. You begin to feel it more clearly. This is not the same place, even if it looks similar. The group adjusts without hesitation. Their movement remains steady, their awareness constant. And yet you notice small changes. The way they examine the ground, the way they respond to unfamiliar details. There is a tension here, a quiet readiness. You walk for some time, the new environment settling around you. Then slowly you begin to notice something else. The absence of certain things. Plants that were once common are no longer present. The ground holds different textures. The air carries new scents. This part of the past resists a clear conclusion. Some perspectives suggest that migration into new regions may have been gradual and continuous, while others propose that it occurred in phases influenced by climate shifts and environmental changes. You let the uncertainty remain. The land does not explain itself, it simply exists. You continue walking the rhythm steady. The group moves forward unchanged in their quiet persistence. And as you follow, you begin to feel something settle more deeply within you. That this long stretch of time is not only about what remains in one place, but about movement across many places. About paths that extend beyond what you can see, beyond what can be traced. You look ahead once more. The horizon stretches endlessly. The land continues, and you begin to understand that this journey does not belong to a single group or a single place. It is part of something larger, something that unfolds slowly, across vast distances, across countless moments, carried forward step by step. You walk on the rhythm unbroken, and somewhere within that quiet continuity, the story continues to expand, not in sudden changes, but in slow, steady movement. Across a world that is always shifting, always opening, always just beyond being fully known. You continue into this unfamiliar stretch of land, the subtle changes becoming more noticeable with each step. The ground feels firmer, more compact, and the air carries a faint dryness that lingers at the back of your throat. The light seems slightly sharper here, not harsh, but clearer, as if the sky is opened just a little more. The group moves forward without hesitation. Their rhythm remains steady. Step, pause, observe, step again, and yet you begin to notice something new, not in the land, but in what they do within it. Their movements carry a different quality now, more deliberate, more precise, as if something within their understanding has settled into place. You follow closely, your awareness sharpening. After some time, the group slows near a cluster of stones scattered across the ground. They are not unusual at first glance, just part of the landscape, worn and uneven. But then you see it. One of the individuals selects a stone, not randomly, carefully. They turn it in their hand, examining its shape, its edges, its weight. Then they sit and begin to work. You move closer. Watching, the motion is familiar, stone striking stone, but there is a difference. The strikes are more controlled, more intentional. Each movement produces a small fragment flaking away in a predictable direction. The shape begins to form. You see it slowly, an edge, sharper than before. More refined, over long study this has become one of the clearer patterns. Tool-making techniques gradually became more sophisticated during this period, with greater control over shape and function, reflecting changes in skill and planning. You sit nearby observing the process. It is not rushed. Each strike is followed by a pause, a moment of adjustment, then another strike. The rhythm is calm, almost meditative. If you slow down your attention, something delicate emerges here. The act of shaping a tool is not only physical, it requires anticipation and understanding of how each action will affect the next. You begin to see it, the intention, the foresight. This is not just reacting to the material, it is guiding it. You watch as another individual joins selecting their own stone. They begin a similar process, though their movements are slightly different, their technique shaped by their own experience. There is variation, but also consistency. You begin to understand how knowledge is shared here, not through explanation, but through observation, through repetition, through quiet presence. There is a faint detail here that is easiest to pass by. Some tools show evidence of being shaped in stages, suggesting that early humans may have carried partially worked materials and completed them later depending on need. You look at the stones scattered around. Some are untouched, others bear marks of earlier attempts. Fragments lie nearby, small and irregular, the remains of the process. Nothing is wasted. Even these fragments may serve a purpose. You pick one up. It is sharp along one edge, though not fully shaped. You turn it in your hand, feeling its form, its potential. You set it down again. The group continues working for some time. The quiet sounds of stone meeting stone fill the air, soft, rhythmic, steady. Then gradually the activity slows. The tools are complete, or complete enough. The group rises. The moment passes. Movement resumes. You stand and follow the rhythm, returning once more. Step, pause, observe. Step again. As you walk, you carry the image of the tools with you. The precision, the intention, the quiet complexity. You begin to feel that something has shifted, not suddenly, but steadily. The actions you observe now carry more structure, more clarity. You begin to wonder how this change unfolds, how it builds over time. This part of the past resists a clear conclusion. Some perspectives suggest that advances in toolmaking reflect changes in cognitive ability, while others propose that they may result from accumulated experience and environmental necessity. You let the question remain. There is no need to resolve it. The land continues, the group continues, and you continue with them. After a while, the terrain begins to shift again. The ground becomes slightly uneven, rising and falling in gentle waves. The vegetation grows sparse in places, leaving open stretches that reflect the light more strongly. You notice how the group responds. Their awareness adjusts. Their movement remains steady, but there is a quiet readiness in how they observe. You follow, feeling that same awareness settle within you. The world around you feels more defined now, not simpler, but clearer, as if the layers you have been moving through are beginning to align. You walk for some time, the rhythm unbroken. Then slowly you begin to notice something else. The way the group interacts with their tools. They do not carry many, only what is needed, but the ones they carry are used with confidence, with familiarity. These are not new objects. They are extensions of the body, tools that shape how they move through the world. This aspect of early human life is supported by multiple lines of evidence. Tools were not just used occasionally, but were central to daily survival, influencing everything from food preparation to material processing. You look at the tool in one individual's hand, at the way it fits, at the way it is used without hesitation, and you begin to understand that these objects are more than functional. They are part of a growing relationship between human and environment, a way of shaping and being shaped by it in return. You continue walking, the land stretching endlessly ahead, the rhythm steady, the awareness deepening, and as you move forward, you begin to feel that something important is taking form. Not in a single but across many, through repetition, through refinement, Through quiet understanding, you walk on, and somewhere within that steady movement the story continues to unfold, not in sudden change, but in careful, deliberate steps, shaping something that will carry forward into everything that comes next. You continue walking, the quiet rhythm of shaped stone still lingering in your thoughts as the land stretches outward once again. The ground feels steady beneath your feet, the air calm and open, carrying only a faint trace of warmth that settles gently into your breath. Step, pause, observe. Step again. The group moves as it always has, their presence steady, their awareness spread across the land in a way that feels both effortless and complete. And yet something within you continues to shift, not in response to a single moment, but as a result of everything you have seen. The tools, the gestures, the markings, the quiet pauses, each one subtle, each one incomplete, and yet together they begin to form something larger. You walk in silence, your thoughts unfolding slowly. You begin to understand why this long stretch of time feels so difficult to explain. Not because nothing happened, but because so much of what happened did not leave clear traces. The land ahead remains open, the horizon wide and unbroken. The sky above carries a soft, even light with only faint variations in tone. Everything feels calm, and yet your awareness has deepened. You begin to look at the landscape differently, not just as space, but as a record, a surface where only certain things remain. Over long study, this has become one of the clearer patterns. The archaeological record preserves some aspects of early human life, such as tools and bones, while leaving others like behavior and thought largely invisible. You let that settle. It explains the silence, not as absence, but as limitation. You continue walking, the rhythm steady. After some time, the group slows again. This time they gather near a gentle rise in the land where the ground offers a slightly wider view of the surrounding area. You step up with them. The view stretches outward. Familiar, and yet you see it differently now. You notice how little of what you have experienced is visible here. No clear signs of the stones you passed, no trace of the shallow hollow, no indication of the marks on the cave wall. Everything has faded or lies hidden. Beneath the surface, you feel the quiet weight of that realization, that the land holds far more than it reveals. A nearly invisible detail begins to matter here. Many early human activities took place in ways that left little lasting impact, meaning that entire lifetimes may have passed without leaving evidence that survives to the present. You stand quietly taking it in. The group remains calm, their attention spread outward. They do not look for what is missing. They respond to what is present. You follow their gaze. The land moves gently in the distance. Subtle shifts, light and shadow, wind passing through low vegetation. Everything continues, unchanged, and yet you carry the awareness of what cannot be seen. You begin to think about how this affects understanding, how those who come later try to piece together a story from fragments, from scattered remains, from incomplete patterns. This remains one of the more uncertain areas. Some perspectives suggest that the apparent gaps in the record reflects true periods of limited change, while others propose that they are simply the result of preservation, with much of human activity never captured in lasting form. You let the uncertainty remain. It feels appropriate. The land does not offer clarity, only presence. You continue walking the rhythm, returning once more. Step, pause, observe. Step again. As you move, the landscape begins to feel more familiar again. Not because it has changed, but because your understanding has. You no longer look for clear signs. You notice the subtle ones, the faint impression, the small variations, the quiet hints of something that once was. The group moves steadily, their actions unchanged, and yet you see them differently now. Each movement carries meaning. Each pause holds potential, even if it leaves no trace behind. You begin to understand something deeper, that the missing parts of this long stretch of time are not empty. They are simply beyond what can be easily seen. They exist in moments that do not preserve well, in actions that do not mark the land, in thoughts that leave no imprint. You walk for some time, the rhythm steady. Then slowly you begin to notice something else. The way the land itself feels continuous, not divided into clear periods, not marked by obvious transition, just flowing, one moment into the next. This part of the past resists a clear conclusion. Different interpretations continue to overlap, suggesting that change during this time may have been gradual, uneven, and difficult to define within simple boundaries. You let the idea settle. It fits what you have experienced. Nothing here feels abrupt. Nothing feels separate. Everything connects. You walk on the land, stretching endlessly ahead. The group moves with the same quiet consistency, and you follow your awareness. Calm your thoughts steady. As you continue, you begin to feel a quiet acceptance that not everything needs to be fully understood, that some parts of the story are meant to remain soft, unclear, open. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady, the ground firm beneath your feet, the rhythm unbroken, and somewhere within that quiet continuity you begin to feel that the mystery itself is part of the story, not something to solve, but something to experience. You continue walking, the quiet understanding of what cannot be seen settling gently within you. The land stretches ahead in soft, unbroken lines, the ground steady beneath your feet, the air calm and balanced. Step, pause, observe. Step again. The rhythm feels almost like breathing now, natural, unforced. The group moves ahead unchanged in their quiet awareness. Their presence feels steady, grounded, as if they belong entirely to this world without needing to question it. And yet your thoughts continue to move, not outward, but inward. You begin to reflect on everything you have passed through, the stones, the markings, the pauses, the encounters, each moment subtle, each one incomplete, and yet together they begin to form something that feels whole. You walk in silence, letting that feeling settle. The land ahead remains open, the sky wide and softly lit. Nothing stands out, nothing demands attention, and yet everything feels meaningful. You begin to understand something more clearly, that what feels missing is not always lost. Sometimes it was never meant to remain. A well-supported view has gradually taken shape that much of early human life unfolded in ways that did not leave durable traces. Materials used were often organic, actions were subtle, and environments shifted in ways that erased what once existed. You let that settle. It explains the quiet, not as absence, but as natural fading. You continue walking, your awareness steady. After some time, the group slows again. This time there is no clear reason, no visible sign. They simply gather. You step in with them. The air feels still. The moment feels soft, soft. Not like the hollow you saw before, not like the marking from the stone. Something gentler. You notice how the group stands closer together. Not tightly, but with a sense of shared space. No one moves for a while. No one gestures. No one creates. They simply remain. You feel it too. A quiet presence. A kind of stillness that does not ask anything. You begin to realize that this too is part of the story. Moments that leave no trace at all. Moments that exist only in experience. If your attention lingers, a quieter layer begins to show. Not every meaningful moment results in a mark or an object. Some exist only in shared awareness, in being together in the absence of action. You stand there letting the stillness settle around you. The land doesn't just change. The air remains calm. Time seems to slow. Or perhaps it simply feels that way. You begin to wonder how many such moments have existed. How many times groups have paused like this. Not for survival, not for necessity, but simply to be. This continues to be interpreted in different ways. Some perspectives suggest that these quiet pauses may reflect growing social complexity or emotional awareness, while others believe they are simply natural moments of rest without deeper significance. You let the question remain. The moment does not require an answer. It simply exists. After a while, the group begins to move again. Slowly, gently. The pause ends without ceremony, without change. You follow the rhythm, returning once more. Step, pause, observe. Step again. As you walk, you begin to feel something settle more deeply within you. A quiet acceptance, not of answers, but of uncertainty. You begin to understand that not everything in this long stretch of time can be explained. Not everything can be traced. Some parts of the story exist only in the moment they were lived, and once past, they leave nothing behind. You walk for some time, the land unfolding endlessly ahead. The group moves steadily, their actions unchanged, and yet you see them differently now. not just as survivors, but as participants in something larger, a continuity that does not depend on being remembered. You look out across the land once more. The horizon stretches wide, unbroken, endless, and you begin to feel the quiet weight of what may never be recovered. Not in a heavy way, but in a soft, steady understanding that the past is not always something that can be held. Sometimes it can only be felt. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, the ground steady beneath your feet, the rhythm unbroken. And as you continue walking, you carry with you a sense of peace within the uncertainty. That even without clear answers, even without complete understanding, the story still exists, quietly, gently, always just beyond what can be fully seen. You continue forward, the quiet acceptance settling gently within you as the land stretches endlessly ahead. The air feels calm and steady, carrying a soft warmth that no longer demands your attention. Your steps fall into their familiar rhythm, each movement smooth, unbroken part of something that now feels continuous. Step, pause, observe, step again. The group moves ahead, unchanged in their quiet awareness. Their presence feels steady, as if nothing in this long passage of time has ever required explanation. They simply move, respond, continue. And yet you now carry something different. Not answers, but understanding. A sense that this long stretch of human history is not defined by what is missing, but by how gently it resists being fully seen. The land ahead remains open, the horizon wide and soft. The sky stretches above in quiet layers of light with no sharp edges, no sudden changes. Everything feels even, balanced. You walk in silence, your thoughts drifting slowly. You begin to reflect on everything that has passed. The faint markings on stone, the quiet shaping of tools, the subtle gestures, the shared pauses, the distant encounters, each moment small, each one incomplete, and yet together they form something continuous, a thread that does not break even when it fades. Looking across many discoveries, a shared pattern becomes visible. Human presence during this time was constant even when evidence is scarce. Life continued in ways that left only fragments behind, making the overall picture difficult to reconstruct in full. You let that settle. It feels right. The absence of clear evidence does not mean absence of life. It means something else, something quieter. You continue walking, your awareness steady. After some time, the group slows again. This time there is no reason at all, no visible sign, no shift in the land. They simply pause. You stop with them. The moment feels soft, familiar, but deeper now. You notice how close you feel to them, not physically, but in understanding. You have walked with them, observed them, felt the rhythm of their lives, and now you begin to sense something more, a connection that does not depend on words or explanation. If your attention lingers, a quieter layer begins to show. The continuity of human experience may not lie in what is recorded, but in the shared patterns of living, adapting and continuing through time. You stand quietly, letting the moment settle. The land remains unchanged, the air still, the light soft. You begin to understand something that feels both simple and profound, that this long stretch of time often described as missing is not empty at all. It is full of lives lived in quiet detail, full of moments that did not need to be recorded to matter. You look at the group again, at their steady presence, at their calm movement, and you realize that they do not experience their lives as incomplete. They are not aware of what will be lost. They are not concerned with what will remain. They simply live. This part of the story still holds multiple possibilities when viewed from the future. Some perspectives suggest that what we call gaps are simply areas where preservation did not occur. Others propose that certain behaviors had not yet developed in ways that left lasting marks. You let the uncertainty remain. It no longer feels like something that needs to be solved, only understood. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, the ground steady beneath your feet, the rhythm unbroken. The group begins to move again. You follow. Step, pause, observe, step again. As you walk, you begin to feel something settle more deeply within you, a quiet sense of continuity, not just across time, but within yourself. You are not separate from this story. You are part of it, a continuation, a result of everything that has come before. You walk for some time, the land unfolding endlessly ahead. Then slowly something begins to shift. Not in the group, not in the land, But in your awareness, you begin to feel the present returning, not suddenly, but gradually, like a soft light rising at the edge of your thoughts. The vast stretch of time you've been moving through begins to settle, not fading, but becoming part of something larger. You take another step, and another. The rhythm continues, but it feels different now, lighter, more distant. You look out across the land one more time. The horizon stretches wide, the sky soft and open, the group moving steadily ahead, and you begin to understand that while you may leave this place, it does not leave you. It remains, in the quiet patterns of thought, in the subtle awareness of what cannot be seen. You continue walking, and slowly, gently, the past begins to loosen its hold, not disappearing, but settling, becoming part of a deeper understanding that you carry with you. You continue walking, though. Something within the rhythm has begun to soften. The land still stretches out before you, wide and calm, steady, the ground firm beneath your feet. And yet the sense of movement feels lighter now, as if the long journey through the distant time is gently beginning to settle. Step, pause, observe, step again. The group ahead continues as it always has, their presence steady, their awareness clear, quiet and complete. They do not look back. They do not slow. They simply move forward as they always have, as they always will within this world. You follow for a little longer. Then gradually you begin to feel a distance forming. Not physical, but something softer. A quiet separation between you and the world you have been walking through. You take in the landscape one more time. The open ground, the subtle variations in light, the faint movements carried by wind. Everything feels familiar now. Not because it has changed, but because you have. As research has accumulated, a clearer picture has formed that early human life was continuous, adaptive, and deeply connected to the environment, even when the details are difficult to recover. The absence of clear records does not diminish the depth of that experience. You let that understanding settle gently within you. There is no need to hold on to every detail, only the feeling. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, soft, even. The group continues forward, gradually becoming less distinct, their forms blending into the land as distance increases. Their movement remains steady, but your connection to it begins to loosen. You slow your steps, then stop. For the first time, you do not follow. You remain where you are, watching. The figures grow smaller, then softer, then almost indistinguishable from the landscape itself. And finally they are gone. Not suddenly, not completely, but gently, as if they have always belonged to that world, and you are only passing through. You stand alone now. The land stretches out around you, calm and open. The air is still, the light soft. You feel no urgency, no need to move, only a quiet awareness of where you are and where you have been. You begin to notice how your thoughts have changed. Slower, calmer, more settled. The questions that once felt important now rest quietly in the background, not unanswered, but no longer pressing. There is a gentle detail here that is easy to overlook. Understanding does not always come from clear answers. Sometimes it comes from sitting with uncertainty long enough for it to feel natural. You take another slow breath. The air feels slightly cooler now, or perhaps you're simply more aware of it. You look out across the land one last time. The horizon stretches wide, unbroken, endless, and yet it no longer feels distant. It feels connected, part of a larger whole. You begin to understand that this long stretch of time, often described as missing, is not something that needs to be filled. It is something that can be felt, experienced, accepted. There is no single perspective that fully explains it. The past remains layered, complex, and at times incomplete, but that incompleteness is part of what makes it real. You let that thought settle, and then gently you begin to turn away. Not abruptly, not with a finality, just a quiet shift. The land begins to fade, not disappearing, but softening at the edges of your awareness. The air changes, becoming lighter, less defined. The ground beneath your feet feels less solid, more like a memory than a place. You take a step and another. The rhythm is still there, but it belongs to something else now, something closer, something present, or also present. The vast stretch of time you've been moving through settles behind you, not lost, but integrated into the quiet background of your thoughts. You feel a calm warmth begin to replace the open air, a sense of stillness that is different from the land, more familiar, more immediate. You take one last breath, slow and steady, and allow yourself to rest. The journey does not end. It simply becomes part of you. And as the night settles gently around your awareness, everything begins to quiet. The land, the movement, the questions, all of it softens, drifting, fading, until only a calm, steady stillness remains. You rest there for a moment, or perhaps longer. There is no need to measure it, only to feel it. And then slowly, gently, you let everything go. Sweet dream.